Welcome back, another episode of Home 9 Yards. As you guys can see, it's our first episode with our Zoom cameras on. I'm not exactly sure how great it's going to look, but we'll see how this turns out, and we'll work on it for future episodes. This is our NBA episode. NBA season starts tomorrow. Two matchups. There's the Nets and Warriors and Clippers Lakers. So basically, this is our before the season predictions, awards, seedings, playoff final teams, and then our champion. So I'll give it to you for the start, Brandon.
Yeah, so we're gonna go through the standings in each conference, and then do the awards, and then pick who's gonna be in the finals for each of us and how many games it's gonna go and who's gonna be the winner. But just to clarify for the standings, so 7, 8, 9, 10, it's gonna be um, a play-in tournament this year. So whoever is in the 7, 8, 9, 10 seeds in each conference, so the 7 and 8 seed are gonna play one game. Whoever wins that game is the 7 seed automatically, and the 9 and 10 seeds are going to play one game. Whoever wins that game plays the loser of the 7 8 seed game, and then whoever wins that game is officially the number 8 seed. So you could have the 7 seed lose both games and they're not even in the playoffs. That can happen. I guess we'll see. We'll see who we pick, but that's the new rule for this year. So I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, so we'll just get right into the Western Conference and the seeding. I guess I'll go first. My number 1 seed is the Nuggets. That might be a little bit of a surprising pick. I don't know exactly who you're going to have there. I'd say it's a pretty surprising pick. I just think I think MPJ is going to be really good. I definitely think that. I think his defense improves, especially this year. I think they're definitely younger than probably the two favorites, the Lakers and the Clippers. I think the regular season means much more to them than it does to LeBron, than it does to Kawhi. I'm not sure exactly how hot the Lakers and Clippers come out the gate. They did make a solid amount of changes. I think the Nuggets probably have slightly more chemistry going into the year, and I think they'll be a bit more fresh as the year goes on. It's only 72 games, which, I mean, take it for what you want. But the Nuggets are my number 1 seed. I could realistically see it going. I could see like 4 or 5 teams. Probably I could see 4 teams honestly getting the number 1 seed, if we're being honest. But I went with the Nuggets, so.
Yeah, I actually also went with the Nuggets. I thought my pick was surprising. I didn't think that you were going to pick them. I kind of had the same reasoning. I didn't think that the Clippers and Lakers they're not really trying to get the number 1 seed, I would say. I mean, like, if they get it, they get it. But especially the Lakers, it doesn't really seem like LeBron's going to play as much in the regular season. He's probably going to sit most back-to-backs. There's a lot more back-to-backs this year because of the condensed schedule. And he's probably just going to rest games throughout the season anyways. Same with Anthony Davis, most likely. So I still have him towards the top of my list, but I don't have him as number 1. I think the Nuggets, I don't really see him as like a championship level type team, but they made it to the Western Conference Finals last year, and I think their team overall is one of the best in the league. And you're right, like the chemistry aspect of that. They really didn't lose anyone. I think the only person they really lost was Torrey Craig. He went to the Bucks, but they still have Jokic, Murray, Porter Jr. is going to play a lot more this year, and they brought back Millsap. Will Barton's coming back from injury. They still have Monte Morris, Gary Harris. So they still have a lot of players that they've had over this couple of years, which I think is going to be great for them, at least in the regular season. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. But, yeah, they're also my number 1 seed. So
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think most people – well, I was going to say, I think most people probably don't have him as number 1. I think that's kind of a reach for some people, but I think it fits perfectly for where they are right now.
No, I agree. I think right now I'd have Jokic as my number 1 seed. Or sorry, my number 1 center in the league right now. I mean, Embiid's too, but I'm going Jokic 1. For me, it's not close right now. Like, if Embiid has a better year, then sure. But for me, I mean, the postseason solidified it for me. I thought they were pretty close, but I leaned Jokic. He was so good in the postseason, and Embiid's postseasons have not been great. His mental, I mean, I don't know exactly what's going on, but he just hasn't showed up a lot of the times, and he's just kind of volatile compared to Jokic. Murray, another one. Murray's postseason, he was like if there was like a most improved postseason player award, he would probably win that. I think if when you're looking at the Nuggets last year, like if you're analyzing them in the regular season last year, you're probably going Jokic for sure is the best center in the league, or he's top two. But Murray, I don't know if he can be the two that leads this team to a championship. I think he proved that he can be a two that gets them to the number one seed for sure. I still think there's probably doubt. I mean, they did get handled pretty quickly by the Lakers. I still think there is going to be some doubt to whether or not, Murray can be like the number two, like the Robin. Who knows? I won't talk about it yet. This team may need another addition, whether it's through trade or something. It really comes down to MPJ. MPJ is kind of the X factor.
Yeah.
I mean, if MPJ plays like a number three, then this team could be so much better. If he doesn't, though, then, I mean, they're not – I don't think they're going super far. I mean, they can still get the number one seed. I predicted it. But I don't know if they beat the Lakers.
If he can improve defensively a little bit so that he can playing in crunch time minutes, which is the problem last year. Not even the regular season, he really wasn't playing that much. But when it came to the playoffs, he wasn't playing at the end of the games because he's not a good defender at all. Obviously, he could score, but I don't really have a problem with him on the offensive end. He'll be fine. And I'm assuming he's fully healthy now. It seems like he was in the bubble. So if he can improve defensively just a little bit, then I would say you have a pretty solid 1-2-3. I'm not sure if it's a good enough 1-2-3 to get you to a championship, but it's definitely good enough to get you to the one seed in the West, especially with how this season is with, again, you had like the shortest off season, technically from when last season ended to this season, not counting like the months in between from the normal regular season to the bubble. But I would say they're the best equipped to get the number one seed in the West.
Yeah, I don't think I'm too outlandish on the Nuggets prediction. I think it's not the one that's you'd be most likely to hear, but I think it's going to be a lot more of a frequent prediction than like people would originally have thought, I guess, if that makes sense. Like we both think Nuggets, but we didn't think we both think Nuggets. So, I mean, I think a lot of people will think Nuggets number one seed, but we'll move to two. I'll let you go first.
So for my 2 seed, I have the Clippers. It's kind of like it's the same thing with Lakers. Kind of, I don't think that Kawhi is going to be playing a lot of games in the regular season. Like he already rested on back-to-back anyways, so I don't expect that to change. We'll see what happens with Paul George. It seems like he's fully healthy. Last year he had 2 shoulder surgeries in the offseason. This year, I don't think he's had any surgeries, not that I'm aware of, so it seems like he's fully healthy. And I think he's a much better player than he showed in the playoffs last year. Not like a great player, but definitely a good number 2. They did lose Harrell, but they lost Landry Shamet, but they did bring in Luke Kennard, who had a pretty good year in Detroit last year. I think he's a pretty good player for their team. They have a new head coach, Tyronn Lue. Obviously, he was on their staff last year, but he's a new voice other than Doc Rivers, who'd been there for, I think, 8 years 9 years, something like that. And it really wasn't working out that much. Whether that's his fault or maybe the player's fault, I don't know. But they still have, obviously, Kawhi, Paul George, Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, Luke Kennard. You have Zubac. You have a couple other players on there. I expect them, even though they may not be not that they're not trying in the regular season, but they won't be putting as much energy in. I think they're too talented enough not to be a top team in the NBA. So that's why I put them at the number 2 seed, because they'll still be great defensively, and offensively they'll be great with Kawhi and Paul George, Lou Williams. So I don't really see them having a problem. I just don't think they'll be able to get the 1 seed. So that's why I put them at 2.
Yeah, this is where we have our first disagreement here. I went Lakers as my 2 seed. I definitely considered the Clippers. I mean, for me, it was either for 2 seed, it was either Clippers or Lakers. I went Lakers. I just kind of defaulted them there over the Clippers because they did have the better regular season last year, and they are the reigning finals champions. I think the Lakers probably got better, and I don't know if I can say the same about the Clippers. I think the Lakers getting Gasol is big. I would also say, I don't know. Like, I just think, Harrell's a big pickup as well. You got him for what I thought that was a much smaller contract than he was going to get. Like, I thought he was going to go to like a Charlotte or like some town or some city that just doesn't get free agents, that they have a lot of money to spend, and they if they're not going to get a max player, like they get the next best thing they can get. So I thought Harrell was gone to somewhere like that, but they get Harrell on like a 2-year, $19 million deal or something like that. They signed Kuzma to an extension. I think it might have been a bit of an overpay, but he still has his uses on this team for sure. You've got Morris, you've got Schroeder, which I would say him and Harrell. I mean, they were probably the two biggest contenders or whatever they were the two best sixth man of the year last year. Yeah. I thought Schroeder was probably the best. I would have picked him to win that, but yeah, I mean, I think this team probably got slightly better. You do lose Howard, but I mean, who cares? I picked them as my number 2 seed. I think this is probably the favorite to win the finals right now. At least, it is they are the favorite. I would probably pick them. I mean, we'll talk about the predictions later. I just think that, I mean, obviously LeBron, I mean, he's the best player in the NBA. I've always thought that. I've always been like not a LeBron guy. I mean, everyone's a LeBron guy, but there was never a time when I was like, I never thought KD was better than LeBron. And I'm not even saying that LeBron always was better than KD. I've always thought it, but I mean, if somebody thought that KD was better, like, all right. When Kawhi won that finals in Toronto, I still thought LeBron was a better, overall player, even though, Kawhi did win the finals that year. And the Lakers didn't make the playoffs. I think that was more of a LeBron just taking the year off, which, I mean, I don't know that's not an excuse. It's just a reality. AD, obviously, having AD is big. I want to say they just signed him into an extension.
Yeah. Well, he was a free agent.
Well, sorry. Yes. Sorry. I mean, he wasn't going to leave regardless.
Yeah.
But I mean, getting him is obviously, locked up for however many years, like 5. Yeah. 5 to something. I mean, that's obviously big. This team's going to be, as long as LeBron's here and AD is here, this team's always going to be a top 4 seed, top 5 seed, even if you had nothing other than them. And you have a really solid team. I mean, Schroeder, you losing Rondo is big, but gaining Schroeder is arguably bigger. I mean, he's a much better offensive player, maybe not as good of a playmaker. And I mean, so the thing is like Schroeder's going to be better in the regular season for sure. I mean, Rondo didn't have necessarily like a great regular season, but I mean, playoff Rondo's been a thing since, he was a rookie. I think losing that is a tough loss, but I think Schroeder makes up for it almost entirely, and there's a potential he's just better than Rondo anyways, even when Rondo's in playoff Rondo mode. So yeah, I mean, I went Lakers 2. I'm assuming you probably went Lakers 3, but I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I went Lakers 3. I mean, I was deciding between, they could have been 2 and Clippers could have been 3. Like, it's more towards like, I just think the Clippers are going to get the 2 seed, but I obviously wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers got it. But one more thing on the Clippers, they did get Serge Ibaka, who I think is actually an upgrade over Montrezl Harrell. He's a better defender by far. Offensively, you could say Harrell's better, but on that team with Kawhi and Paul George, I think that Ibaka fits better.
I mean, Ibaka will be able to guard Davis better, sure.
Yeah. And Harrell, he couldn't stay on the floor because he can't play defensively. So yeah. I just think for that team, I think Ibaka is a better fit for them. And I think Harrell, some people could say that he's a better player, he's offensively, but I'm not really sure. It didn't really seem like they liked him that much, the Clippers did, like in the locker room. I don't know if that's from Kawhi or that's everyone against Kawhi. It seems like there's a struggle in the locker room there, but it seemed like his – I don't know what that was. But,
yeah, one of my like tabs I'd open just put an ad. All right, my bad.
But I just think that for them, I think Ibaka is probably the much better fit. So, well, I mean, you're right. I'm getting Schroeder. I mean, kind of going to my Lakers point, getting Schroeder's big. I think losing Rondo definitely hurt. Offensively, you're going to be way better, but defensively, playmaking, decision-wise, leadership-wise, I think you definitely lose something in Rondo. Now, you still have LeBron, so you don't have to like worry about the leadership part as much. But I think for the regular season, it will work like for the Lakers because, like I said, LeBron's not going to be playing as much this season. Davis is going to rest a few nights, most likely, especially with his injury concern that he's always had. Last year, he stayed healthy for the majority of the season, and then for the playoffs, he definitely did, which is good. But he gets injured every single year, so it wouldn't surprise me if he did get injured this year. So that's why I kind of assume they're going to rest him most likely. So Harrell and Schroeder will be big in that aspect because they're probably going to be playing more, at least in the regular season. I mean, they'll be playing in the playoffs definitely, but the regular season they can kind of help carry the load when LeBron or Anthony Davis isn't playing. But when it comes to the playoffs, I think the Lakers are definitely the best team, at least in the Western Conference, probably in the NBA. But I just think for the regular season, I think the Clippers will just be a step better than them. Not a step, but maybe like a half step better. So that's why I had them at 2, and that's why I have the Lakers at 3. But again, you could reverse them, and it'd be the same thing.
Yeah, I would say Harrell is probably a better regular season player than he is a postseason player. I think it's in the regular season, same thing kind of with Giannis, but not nearly to the same extent or whatever because Giannis is a much better player. But I think if you really take the time to scheme around slash attack Harrell, he's a much worse player. Whereas in the regular season, you're not doing as much of that. Maybe that's just I don't know. I mean, he's like 6'7", and he's like a forward slash center. I mean, you just can't have that out on the court sometimes. Like you can't have him as your 5 if you're playing when you were the Clippers last year. Like he's not guarding Davis.
Yeah.
I would say Harrell's a nice fit for the Lakers. I don't think he's going to be another 6 man of the year candidate. I don't think he's that good of a player. I definitely think I think last year and well, not in LA, but playing with the Clippers was probably his best year he's ever going to have. Obviously the playoffs did not go the way he wanted it to. This is essentially like I don't know if you want to call it a prove it contract or not, but I think if he plays well with the Lakers and who knows, maybe they even three-peat, and Harrell's there for both years, like somebody's probably going to sign him to something bigger than 2 years, 19 million, especially if he's like, maybe the 5th best player on that team, which is not out of the question at all. Maybe even like 4th. I mean, then some team would definitely consider signing him. Yeah. For my 3rd seed though, I mean, I did go with the Clippers. I would say in my opinion, the Clippers are the 2nd best team in the West right now. Even though I do have the Nuggets at number 1, I think when it comes to the playoffs, having, it's all about star power. I think Kawhi, even though I did call Jokic the best center in the league, I still have Kawhi as a better overall player. I mean, the forward is the best, like I would call it the best position in basketball, or like the most valuable anyways. Like I think having a Kawhi is more valuable than having a Jokic. I just think, a center can do a lot, but if you don't have a guard that can give it to him, or, I mean, the center just can't do as much. He doesn't have the ball as much. He's not as athletic. I still think that Kawhi is more valuable than Jokic. He's also just a better player in general. PG, say what you want about him. A couple years ago, we probably had him as a top 10, maybe like top 7 or 8 player in the league, maybe even slightly higher. He was an MVP candidate last year in OKC. He had a bad year last year, especially in the playoffs, especially in the playoffs. I still think he's probably a top 20 player right now, and that's good enough as the number 2, especially when Kawhi's your number 1. And this roster is still fairly good. We talked about the losses, but yeah, I mean, you still have Pat Bev. You got Batum. You just traded for Kennard. You traded Shamet for Kennard. I mean, that's an upgrade in my mind.
Yeah.
You got Marcus Morris back. You still have Lou Will, who, again, I mean, he's going to be a perennial 6 man of the year candidate. We'll see what happens. He is aging. He's 34, but he's still going to be great. He's still Lou Will. This team is still contending for a championship. This team is definitely championship or bust, at least in my mind. You just did get Paul George to sign that extension. However, I don't know that means that much. Obviously, you need both him and Kawhi to stay, but the number 1 priority is Kawhi. The number 2 priority is George. If Kawhi leaves and George stays, that's arguably your worst outcome, because you're now stuck with Paul George, especially if he does bad this year, which if Kawhi leaves, you'd have to assume George does do poorly this year. You have an aging superstar who's probably not a top 20 player in the league anymore. Bad contract. Nobody wants to trade for him. You have no picks. He's still going to be good to the point where you're not going to be like bottom tier, but you're also not going to be close to competing for a championship. That's exactly where you don't want to be as the Clippers. And I mean, ultimately right now, if you're a Clippers fan or the Clippers owner, like if you're Ballmer, I mean, you're hoping that doesn't happen. I think you probably have to win the finals. I don't know. Maybe Kawhi stays because he just loves the Clippers and he wants to be in LA and he doesn't want to play in LA with LeBron and AD and he doesn't want to go anywhere else. So that's definitely a possibility. But I mean, it's really like this is a big year for the Clippers.
I would say that I don't think they need to win the finals for him to stay. I know Kawhi likes it in LA. I don't think he really wants to leave. I mean, the only way was if they had a disastrous season, something crazy happened, and he decided to move on. I don't really see that happening. The way that we have our standings, they meet each other in the second rounds. They wouldn't even. You'd have to go through the Lakers before even getting to the Western Conference Finals. So I mean, maybe that would have an impact. Like if they lost in like 5 games to the Lakers, maybe he'd realize that he just doesn't have the pieces around him. Paul George isn't enough, and they can't trade for another guy. They have no picks. They have like barely any players that are valuable enough to get like another star player to go along with them. So maybe then he'd want to leave, but I'd kind of be surprised. Like, let's say they meet each other in the second round, and the Clippers, it goes like 7 games, and it's a tough series throughout, but the Lakers win. I would see Kawhi staying. I don't know. I'd be surprised if he left.
Sure. Maybe if it goes 7, they lose to the Lakers in the second round. The only thing is like, is this Clippers roster getting any better? I mean, my answer is no. So
it's not going to. It's older the are veterans, and the only young guy you have is Kennard, really, and he's not going to turn into like.
He's not like. I would argue Kennard's like already in his prime. Like he's not getting.
Yeah, he's going to give you. He's going to give you like 14, 15 points a game. He's going to be great from 3. He's going to be okay defensively, and he can make some plays with the ball. But you don't have a young team. You're in a win now mode, obviously. So I don't know. I just feel like he stayed. I'd be surprised if he left.
I would be slightly surprised if he left too.
It'd have to be something crazy.
It'd have to be something crazy, but I mean, the Mavericks are only getting better. The Nuggets are probably only getting better. There are other teams in the West that are, only getting better. It's a difficult decision if you're Kawhi, especially if this Clippers team looks bad. But we'll move on into the 4 seed. I'll let you go first.
Yes, for my 4 seed, I have the Mavericks getting up to the 4 seed. Last year, they were the 7 seed, or they were the 6 seed last year in the first round. They're only going to get better. Luka, he's already a top player in the NBA, and he'll be entering his 3rd season. I expect him to be. He's probably going to finish as a top 5 player at the end of the season. And you look at all the guys, he's going to end up top 5 if he already isn't top 5. It kind of matters on – so the additions that they made, so they lost Seth Curry, but they traded him for Josh Richardson, which I think some people may say that's a downgrade because of Curry's role on the Mavericks as being just a shooter for them. And when Luka, their offense is kind of just Luka makes the plays, whether he's shooting the ball, which he's not a great 3-point shooter, which he has to improve on, or he's just making plays at the rim, or he can kick out to shooters. Josh Richardson's also a pretty good shooter, not as good as Seth Curry, but they drafted Tyrell Terry, who can fill that Curry spot on their team. He's also a great 3-point shooter, and I think that was a great draft they had. I think he was rather at the end of the first round or like the first pick of the second round. I think that was great value for him, but it's really going to depend on Porzingis' health. If he could stay healthy, again, I don't really think he's going to play like the entire season, but he's going to have to play majority of it. But when it comes to the playoffs, I think he's going to have to be healthy in order for them to make any type of noise. And the way I have it right now, I mean, if the Nuggets do end up as the 1 seed, the Mavericks are the 4 seed, I really like that matchup for them in the second round. Again, they both have to win, but if they were to play the Nuggets in the second round, that'd be a great matchup for them. I think they could handle the Nuggets. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did make it to the Western Conference Finals. With the team that they have and with how Luka is going to play this year, he's probably going to average 39-9, 30-10-9, something like that. He may average a triple-double. I guess we'll see. But with the team that they have and the construction of the roster, I expect them to be one of the top teams in the West.
Yeah, and we agree here. I'm Mavs at 4 for, basically every reason you said. Luka, I would argue right now that he's already probably top 5, maybe 6 or 7, but he's in that tier where you could argue he's like 4 or 3, and I wouldn't even necessarily like throw a fit. Luka's only going to get better. Kristaps, we'll see what happens, but he's ultimately he may be the second best player on the team, but he's probably still like their X factor player. I mean, this team probably goes as far as Kristaps goes. Luka's going to be there no matter what. I mean, he has to, obviously, but they don't have like a three. Like they don't have like a third best player on this team really. So Kristaps is going to have to be. I mean, he's going to have to be like really good, especially if they want to make it to like the Western Conference Finals. If this seeding does happen, they would meet Denver in the second round most likely, and I mean, Luka's not going to beat Denver by himself. That's for sure. At least in my mind. I mean, he's obviously he might even by the end of the year he might even be the second best player in the league, maybe even the first. Who knows? But he's not going to beat the Nuggets by himself. So he needs Kristaps. Richardson's a nice pickup. I think he is an upgrade over Curry. He's better defensively. Tyrell Terry, I would agree. He was the first pick of the second round. Yeah. He was the best shooter in the draft, probably, at least not super high up. And I would probably say he is the best shooter in the draft. He'll be able to shoot, obviously. I mean, yeah. Other than that, I mean, you've got like Tim Hardaway, but their roster's not super deep. I would assume they're going to still be the best offensive team in the league or up there. Defensively, we'll see. Luka could definitely get better on the defensive side.
Well, I think that's where Josh Richardson comes into play. It's like Luka's never going to be great defensively if you ask him to put up 30 points a game and do everything he's doing offensively. So I think Richardson obviously is better defensively than Curry is. And then you get Terry, you could fill that role. So you basically just getting an extra player who's a better defender, still a pretty good shooter, and make plays with the when he needs to. And then you're filling Curry's role with the draft pick that you had. They're not a great defensive team. Like I think last year they were first in offensive rating, but they're rather last in defensive rating or just near the bottom. They're not a good defensive team, but I think Richardson can help them in that. And as long as they could be middle of the pack in defensive rating, they'll still be one of the top offenses, probably no matter what. So with that and the pickup of Richardson, I think that's very underrated when looking at all the moves that's happened this offseason. I think Richardson was a very good pickup for them, and it worked out for both teams. I mean, we'll get into the Sixers later, but I think it was a good pickup for both teams and their needs on the roster. But, yeah, I mean – I think we'll see what happens at the playoffs. I think it does come down to Porzingis if he could take that next – just be healthy. I think it's really the first thing that needs to happen. But if he could take that next step to where he's getting you 20 and 10 in the playoffs and Luka's going to get you 30, maybe even 35, you expect him to elevate in the playoffs. So if he's averaging 30 in the regular season, I'd assume he'd average 35 in the playoffs. So if you can get that from Porzingis, 20 to 23 – and then 10 rebounds and good defense, which he's a good shot blocker and he's decent defensively, at least, moving laterally and his quickness and everything like that. So I think for the regular season, I think they'll be fine, but we'll have to see what happens when they get to the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say, at least in my mind, I would say in the West, looking at the West, I have my top two teams right now, the Lakers and the Clippers. This isn't necessarily talking about seeding, but those are my top two teams in the West. I would have the Nuggets third. And then after that, I'd probably have the Mavericks and a couple other teams in there that are like between 4 to 6, 4 to 7. I don't think it's a lock the Mavericks make the 4 seed. I think the Mavericks have a lot of potential and more potential than the teams I'll talk about later. But I also think they have potential to kind of fall flat this year. I think they had a better start to the year last year than they did to the end of the year. They definitely were encouraging against the Clippers. But how encouraging, can they be if the Clippers they flat out just lost in 7 to the Nuggets. And at the time, the Clippers may have just been worse than we thought they were last year. So I don't know how much I can look into the Mavericks game or the Mavericks series. So, I mean, who knows? I could definitely see them being the 4 seed. I could even see them maybe being the 3 seed. Maybe the Lakers just kind of, don't try that much and they end up getting with the 4 or 5 seed. That's a possibility. But yeah, I mean, I have the Mavericks at the 4 seed. I'll let you go with your 5th seed first.
Is for my 5th seed, I'm going with the Rockets, but there's definitely an asterisk next to their name. It depends on what happens with Harden. If I'm assuming that Harden is going to be a Rocket for the entire season. So if he's going to be a Rocket for the entire season, I have him as the 5th seed. Seems like you're disagreeing with me, but I'll get into it. So he Obviously, he's one of the top players in the league. There's no doubt about that. I think Wall. I don't think he's going to be great, but I think he's going to be a different fit than Westbrook was last year, where they both. I mean, Westbrook averaged 27, Harden averaged 34. I think Wall's probably going to average around 20 to 22. We'll have to see how he plays. I'm not. I mean, from what he's seen in the preseason so far, he's actually looked pretty good athletically coming off the injuries, but we'll have to see how he does perform in the regular season and playing with Harden, where obviously the offense is just give it to Harden and see what he could do with the ball. We'll have to see how that works out. Maybe it's different. They have a new coach. They have a whole new coaching staff and front office. So maybe Coach Steven Silas will create a different offense. He was obviously with Luka last year. So people kind of think that the offense will most likely be the same as it was with D'Antoni. But if they can just change the offense a little bit to where it's not so stagnant, not so iso ball, get more people involved. They still have great shooters. I mean, Eric Gordon, he's definitely regressing, but him at his best is definitely still a really good three-point shooter. PJ Tucker, he's obviously getting older. I think he's like 36, 35, but he can still play defense. They get Christian Wood, who I think is going to be a really good player. He only kind of played like half a season last year in Detroit, but he showed you that he could be a top center in the league. They got DeMarcus Cousins. We'll have to see how he plays, but coming off the bench, I think he could be a valuable role player for them. And they still have Daniel House, Ben McLemore's a shooter. So I think they still have pieces to where if Harden's going to play the entire season for them and still be James Harden, I think they could still be a top team. They're still going to put up a ton of points. Defensively, we'll have to see how they are. They'll be better than they were last year just because their tallest player was 6'8". This year they have 2 7-footers with Cousins and Wood playing. So Tucker doesn't have to guard Anthony Davis or Nikola Jokic every single game. So I think they'll definitely be better this year in some aspects than last year. And last year they were the 4 seed, and this year I think they'll be the 5 seed. Again, that's if Harden's going to be there for the entire year.
If Harden's going to be there the entire year, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's going to be. But if he is, sure. I don't know how to feel about the Rockets right now. I guess I'll talk about them in a bit. But all right, my 5 seed, I have the Trailblazers. That might be a surprising pick. I don't necessarily think it is. I think people underrate this team. They think they forget how good this team was a couple of years ago. They had a fairly bad regular season last year. They barely made it to the playoffs. They ended up having to beat out the Grizzlies. They were behind when the bubble started. They ended up having the play-in game. They won. I thought the Trailblazers were a much better team than the Grizzlies last year, and I think they proved it eventually. I think they were kind of out of gas when they played the Lakers last year. I mean, they clearly were not as good as the Lakers. The Lakers went on to win the finals. But I think had the Trailblazers not had to like try their butts off in the bubble and have the play-in game, I think they could have made that series much more interesting than it ended up being. And even then, it was still a relatively interesting series. The Blazers ended up winning game 1. You get Nurkic back for a full year next year, and that's big. He's probably your third best player, arguably. You get Robert Covington in a trade. I mean, he's probably the premier 3-and-D player. There's nobody else I think of first when I think of 3-and-D. McCollum, he's still there. He's your second best player to Lillard. Him and Lillard have worked very well in the past. I think there's an argument to be made that you might have to trade McCollum if you could even trade him. Right now, I mean they're not. We'll see how everything works out. I have them as my 5 seed, so I'm not necessarily saying they're going to win the finals or anything. But I think this team is very good. I think this team is underrated. People forget how good this team was, and this team did beat the Nuggets. And the Nuggets are definitely better now than they were then. But it just goes to show that I don't think this team is like an 8 seed next year. I don't think this team misses the playoffs next year. I definitely don't think this team misses the playoffs next year. I'd be willing to bet, not my life on it, but I'd be willing to bet a lot on it that the Blazers make the playoffs. And I think people would agree. But I think you probably have them at like 7 or 8. And I don't think they're 7 or 8 seed. So
I have them lower. I just to say a couple of things about it. I think they definitely improved getting Covington, a healthy Zach Collins, a healthy Yusuf Nurkic. You bring back Rodney Hood. I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have, but bring him back. Nassir Little, maybe he can have a bigger role this year, at least perform better than he did last year. But I've never been a I've never been a big fan of Lillard. I think he's definitely a top point guard, but I'm not sure if he's. People saying he's better than Steph Curry. I think they just forgot how good Steph Curry was because he didn't play last year. He
Well,
only
I
played a
didn't
couple
say
of
that, by the
games.
way. I did not say that, by the way.
No, but I'm not saying you're saying that, but some people are leaning that way in that they think he's better than Curry. I mean, he's he's either missed the playoffs or been like the 8th seed like every single year. Now, the year that they made it to the year that they made it to the Western Conference Finals, there's a weaker West. That's obvious if you look at the teams and you look at what happened in that playoffs. They got swept by the Warriors, and now people will say that they were winning in every single game. They had no chance to beat them that year, and that was without KD that they got swept. So imagine if KD was playing that, it still would have been a sweep, but it would have been absolute blowouts every single game. Now, they like I said, they've gotten better. Do I see them being the 5 seed? I don't think so. It seems like they always underperform going in, like starting a season. They're always under 500 at the All-Star break every single season. I don't know why that is, but they always are.
I mean, 2 years ago they were the 2 seed. By the way, I know it was a weaker West. If you
No, they were the 3 seed. I think they weren't the 2 seed because they played the Thunder in the first round.
they might have been the 3. Maybe it was.
They were the 3 seeds. The Thunder Thunder were like the 3-4 seed, and then George got injured and they fell down to the 6 seed. They played in the first round.
Sorry, maybe the Nuggets were the
series,
2 seed then.
Yeah, no, the Nuggets are 2 seed. They played in the second round, which went 7 games. The Nuggets probably should have won that series. But the Thunder series would have been different if George was healthy. He was injured. That's when he had the.
Would it have been
surgery.
different?
It would have because he
Would
was
the overall series outcome or just like the way?
I would say it would probably go 6 or 7 games, and I wouldn't be surprised if Thunder won because George was an MVP candidate that year, and you could tell he just wasn't healthy. Both shoulders were completely dead. So I don't know if they would have won the Thunder, but it would have been a different series. The Nuggets series, they easily could have lost that series, and like I said, they got swept by the Warriors without KD. I just don't see them being the 5 seed. I do have them making the playoffs, at least at the end of the regular season. We'll get into it later, but I just would be surprised if they actually are the 5 seed in the West. I think the West is definitely tougher than it is this year than it was in 2018 or 2018 when that playoff series was happening.
Yeah, I mean you're not wrong on that. You're definitely not wrong on that. I still think you underrate the Blazers. I definitely don't agree with the Rockets pick. I can see it. I'm not a big Rockets guy. I mean, I'm just not a big Harden guy in general. I think
Regular season Harden though.
Regular season Harden. I mean, he's regular season Harden. He's going to get stuff done. But he's one of those players that in the playoffs he's just much less effective. Defense.
I mean, we're just talking about regular season here. Though.
I understand. But even then, I still don't think. I don't know how the wall thing's a gamble. Even Harden itself is a gamble. The prediction itself is just something too risky for me to take. Maybe the Blazers is a risky pick as well, but for me, it's something.
If Harden's not on the Rockets, then maybe I could see. Obviously, teams are going to jump because the Rockets are most likely wouldn't make the playoffs unless they get Ben Simmons, and maybe they can get like a 7 or 8 seed, or maybe be in the play-in tournament. But so that means teams would jump. So maybe the Blazers could jump up to 6. Maybe they could get 5 if the Jazz falter a little bit, and maybe they just play better than I'm expecting them to play, at least to start the season. But if Harden's going to be there the entire year, they're going to be 5 or 6. I would say 6 at the worst. So I just don't see the Blazers getting all the way up to 5 if Harden's going to be there the entire year.
Sure. I mean, yeah, maybe.
So for my 6 seed, I actually have the Jazz. Do you have the Jazz as your 6 seed?
No.
No? Okay. Well, I thought we'd probably agree there. It seemed like those teams would match up there. But speaking of the Jazz, I mean, they have Mitchell. Obviously, they have Rudy Gobert. Defensive Player of the Year just got a contract extension. They both did. They both got contract extensions. Gobert, you could say, was maybe a little bit of an overpay, but I think for the impact on the team that he has, I think it fits perfectly for them. I think one thing that really hurt them last year was that they didn't have Bogdanovich in the bubble and for the playoffs. He was their 3rd best player last year. He would give you 18 to 20 points a night as your 3. That means that Ingles wouldn't have to do as much. They got Jordan Clarkson, who was really good for them last year. As an off the bench, maybe could start, but usually an off the bench guy who could give you 15 to 20 points every single night, maybe even more. So I really like the team, and they also have Mike Conley, who I think has been underrated these last year. He's always underrated, but last year he just didn't play well. He wasn't healthy, and new situation. I don't think he really knew how to gel with the team. I think having a full off season can help for that. So I expect him to be better. They also brought back Derek Favors, who is a guy who could play good defense. He's going to rebound the ball. He was obviously with Utah for the longest time, then went to the Pelicans last year. So I think that's also an improvement. So I think based on their improvements through the roster, whether it's additions this year or even additions last year, I think they'll be better. I still see them being a 6 seed because I just don't. Mitchell and Gobert are enough to get them to a 4 seed or above. I think you have limitations with those two players, so that's why I'm at the 6 seed. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they were 7 or 8. I just think it kind of depends on how Mitchell plays and how the surrounding pieces, if what I'm saying comes true, and that Conley can be good, and Bogdanovich and Clarkson can give you that scoring when you need it, when Mitchell isn't going to get you 25 a night.
So yeah, I mean, I think I didn't have the Jazz in my 6 seed, but I considered it. I think it's going to come down to Mitchell and Gobert ultimately. Gobert is one of those guys that I don't think he's worth the contract. He's a great defensive player. He's one of the best centers in the league, but ultimately, is he going to be the difference between a competitor? You know, is he going to be the difference between going from like a competing team to a championship winning team? I don't know. I mean, I don't think Gobert is necessary to win a finals championship. He's obviously a great piece. He's going to make the Jazz better this year. But at least looking like long term or even just like playoff term, like actually getting over the hump, I don't think he's not the 2. He'd have to be the 3. And with what you're paying him, I mean, is he going to be the 3, long term? I don't know. We'll see. Mitchell, I think a couple years ago, maybe even last year, there was an argument to be made between Tatum and Mitchell. If there's like videos on like redrafts of that draft class, and I think it was relatively split. I think maybe people even leaned Mitchell. Right now, I think I'd go Tatum, and I think most people would as well. I think Tatum had a better year last year. I don't know how you feel about that. I know you're not as big of a Tatum guy. I know you're not a Tatum guy at all.
Yeah.
But I would say Mitchell has to be objectively as good, if not better than Tatum, for them to be better than the 6 seed / get far in the playoffs. I don't know that happens. I think overall the roster is great. It's a well-coached team. It's a solid organization. They're typically speaking, there's not many distractions. Last year they had the COVID thing with Gobert. I think they'll be a solid team. They'll compete the whole year. Whoever they play in the first round, whatever it is, if you have them as the 6 seed, who did you have as your 3 seed?
I had the Lakers.
So I mean, even though they probably lose that series, I still think they're a team that would compete till the end. They might even be able to push at 6. Who knows? But I mean, they're a solid team. They're definitely not. They're a safe pick at 6. My 6 seed, I ended up going with the Warriors. It might be slightly a surprising pick. I mean, especially just no Thompson. I mean, that makes the Warriors a scary team to pick. And I know we just talked about Curry. I mean, Curry, again, I mean, he's the best point guard in the league. It might not be close. Maybe it's close, but probably not. No Thompson's big. I mean, Wiseman, we'll see how well he plays. I don't know that he does not have to have an absolutely outstanding year for them to make the 6 seed, at least in my mind. Picking up Oubre, I mean, Oubre's a nice piece. He has to play well. I mean, he will play well. He can give you, I mean, he could probably give you at least 15 this year, right? I mean,
yeah,
definitely. Wiggins, I mean, I know everybody hates Wiggins. He'll put up points. Will he do anything other than that? Definitely not. I don't like Wiggins at all. But he's still a solid offensive piece. He can, I don't know exactly, what his role is going to be, but he'll fit somewhere in. Green, I mean, he's regressing. He's just not the same player at all. But again, I mean, to make the 6 seed right now, does Green have to be what he was? In my opinion, probably not. We'll see exactly how this team plays out. It's kind of just Curry and a bunch of misfits. But I still think Curry is so good. Oubre is a solid piece. Wiseman's going to be a solid rookie. I don't see him being a bust. Wiggins is still a solid offensive player who will find his role on the team. Green may not be great, but he's still going to be solid defensively. Offensively, it's Draymond Green, so we'll see. I still have this team as a 6 seed, although I could see them being. I don't know if I see them being much higher than 6. I could see them maybe at 5, but I don't think they go much higher than that. They could be a team that goes to the 8 seed or maybe even the 9 seed. I mean, who knows? It really depends on how well Curry plays. But I see him being in the MVP conversation. I don't think he's going to win it ultimately because 6 seeds just don't win MVPs. It's just a reality of the situation. But yeah, I mean, they're my 6 seed. So
Yeah, I mean, I have them for my 7 seed. And again, I could see them being the 6 seed. I wouldn't be surprised. But, I mean, I kind of agree with you on what you're saying. Wiseman, he doesn't have to be great. He probably just has to get to probably 14, 13 points a game, 9, 10 rebounds. He kind of just has to be a guy who's going to be there. And he's not going to have to do much in this offense. So I kind of expect him to have a pretty good rookie year, but nothing insane. I actually probably higher on Wiggins than probably you are and probably most people. I think the situation in Minnesota was just terrible. That's just a losing organization mentality that Minnesota has, and it's obviously shown its effect on Karl Anthony Towns because I think he's a much better player than he is showing on the Timberwolves right now. But I think getting him out of Minnesota, a healthy Curry, obviously losing Thompson really hurts because we had a really good team with Thompson. If Thompson was healthy, they'd definitely be higher up. But I think he can still give you 18. I mean, he's a career average 20-point per game scorer. I mean, it's hard to take away from him. Obviously, he doesn't do much everywhere else, but I think he'll be better defensively. Not great, but I think he'll be better. Getting Oubre, that really helps because he's a good outside shooter. He's going to give you 15 points a night. He's not going to replace Thompson, obviously, but he's going to be able to be a defensive presence enough to where if Wiggins can improve defensively, you could have your wings can be pretty good defensively. I think Draymond's going to be better. Draymond's not going to I don't know how many points he's going to average. It may be 6 points, 8 points a game, but I think he'll be a lot better defensively. It looks like he's slimmed down. Playing with Curry, healthy Curry, playing with Oubre, Wiseman, Wiggins, that would be so much better. He doesn't have to do everything, not like you're asking him to do everything, but he can still make plays with the ball. He's still a great passer, and defensively, he did win Defensive Player of the Year before. I'm not saying he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year, but I think he's going to be a lot better. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on an all-defensive team. So, yeah, no, I definitely like their team, but right now I have him as the 7 seed. I could definitely see them flip-flopping with the Jazz at 6 and 7. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, but it definitely comes down to Curry and how well he plays. I'd expect him to be towards the MVP conversation. He's not going to win it, but I agree with what you're saying. He's definitely going to be at the top of that. He's definitely going to be in that conversation of MVP.
yeah, he'll be similar to where Chris Paul was last year, not in play style or anything or what you thought of his year, but he'll be somebody that is not going to win it, but you feel like you have to mention him just because without him, this team would be nowhere near where they were. We'll see that with OKC when, I don't think either of us have OKC in our playoff picture. I could be wrong on that, but I'd be surprised if I would have to end the show if you had them there. Anyways, so we'll go to I'll go to my 7 seed. It's the Jazz. It was just our 6 and 7 seeds flip-flopped. I kind of already touched on them. There's not too much to really say. It's going to come down to Mitchell and Gobert. I've already said this all. So we'll move on. We'll move on to the 8 seed. Do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first? I'll go first. I'll go first.
You go first.
Here. This might be a surprising pick. I don't know if it is. I have the Grizzlies as my 8 seed. They were almost there last year. I want to say they had a better start to them than they did, the second half. The Grizzlies, it's just going to come down to Morant. Is he going to take the leap this year? Whatever you define the leap as. I mean, he had one of the best rookie years anybody's ever had, really. I don't know about ever had, but he had an incredible rookie year. He wasn't even the best rookie in his class, but even then, most years he wins Rookie of the Year. He did win Rookie of the Year. I mean, I would say he wasn't the best, but anyways, Jaren Jackson Jr., he should develop into somebody that can be a 2, or that's what you'd hope if you're the Grizzlies. I don't know that it happens for a championship winning team, but to be the 8 seed, Morant and Triple J, it doesn't get much better than that. Brandon Clark was an absolute steal in the draft a couple years ago. I
last
mean,
year.
last year. Sorry, he was what was he in rookie of the year? Was he like fourth or something? Third, right?
He was something like that, maybe fourth. I'm
I
not
think he was.
exactly
I
sure,
think
but
he
he was
was a
up there.
finalist, right? I want to say he was a finalist. I could be wrong on that, but again, I mean, absolute steal of a pick. I just remember I forget who the Celtics drafted that we could have had him.
He took
It was
Romeo Langford.
I think it was Romeo Langford, yes, and I think Clark was like 6 picks later in the draft, and I mean Langford had a horrible rookie year. He just looks like he's just not really going to play at all. But yeah, I mean Clark was an absolute steal of a pick. I mean, you just got Justice Winslow. I mean, we'll see how everything works out. I think this team is very good. I mean, Morant, Triple J. I think if they get better, the Grizzlies will get better. I think they'll be a much better. I don't know about much better, but I think they'll be a better team than last year, even though their seeding only improved by like one spot technically. I just think the West is so stacked that I can't really put the Grizzlies above any of these teams. You could argue the Warriors. I might have the Warriors slightly high, but I still don't. I don't think I do. I just think it depends on Curry really for the most part. I still think the Jazz are a better team than the Grizzlies. I definitely don't see the Grizzlies having a better record than the Jazz. I think the Jazz just have too many pieces. I mean, Michael Conley, even though he didn't play great, I think he's going to have a bit of a rebound year. Bogdanovich, obviously Mitchell and Gobert. But yeah, I mean, I think this Grizzlies team is a team that is going to be vying for that 8 seed, that 7 seed. Do they get it? I'm predicting yes, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Grizzlies end up as the 10 seed. I could even see them being the 11 seed. I mean, they might end up being the 7 seed. I don't know, but I think they're somewhere in between that 7 to 10 or 11 range. I have them at 8 though.
That was pretty surprising. I did not think you were going to go Grizzlies there. I don't even have the Grizzlies in my top 10. Um, I guess I'm just
Oh.
going to say so for 8, I have the Trailblazers. I mean, we've been over them. I'm just not as high on them, but I still think they'll make the playoffs. I'd be surprised if they didn't make the playoffs, especially with the play-in tournament. But even if it was a normal year, I'd still think they'd just make the playoffs anyways. At least be the 8 seed, so have a chance to be in the playoffs. But I'm just going to say my next 2 picks, just because they're kind of the same kind of pick, because the 9 and 10 seed, they're in the play-in tournament. So
Okay.
I'm going with the Suns for my 9 seed and the Pelicans for my 10 seed. So I don't even have the Grizzlies on there, like I said. Um, so that means that you're rather leaving off one of those teams or you're leaving off the Rockets, but I guess we'll get into that. I think the Suns, they get Chris Paul. They lose Oubre, but I think getting Chris Paul was big. They got Jalen Smith in the draft, which we'll see how he plays. He's going to be a bench guy most likely. They get they still have Booker and Ayton. Booker's going to give you 25 points a night, maybe more, depending. Probably with Paul, probably not. But I think Ayton, obviously they should have went Luka with that draft pick. But, I mean, let's looking back on it. I think Ayton was definitely – it's not a bad pick at all. It's not like he took Marvin Bagley with the next pick. So it's not a bad pick. And he's – I mean, I think last year he was 18 and 11 or 18 and 12 he was, and I think he can probably be like a 20. He could maybe just give you 18 again with Chris Paul being there, because he's probably going to give you
He's gonna get
17
better. He's
points a
gonna have a better
game. But
year. He'll have a better
he's
year.
going to be, even if his stats don't look better, he's going to be better. And defensively, I expect him to be better. So I think he's going to improve just playing wise, maybe not stats wise. Booker will be pretty good. Paul's going to be good. He's not going to be as good as he was last year, obviously, but he'll be good. And then, the rest of the team, it's a decent roster. It's nothing amazing. I mean, they got Jay Crowder, which I think is actually a pretty good pickup for them. But I don't see them getting into the top 8, but I see them at 9. And then for the Pelicans, they have a good young team, but I don't see them being able to get one of those spots. Again, they'll have a chance at 10, but we'll have to see how Zion plays, if he can stay healthy. I'd be surprised if it would be interesting to see how much he actually plays this season, just because of the injuries that he's had. It's a condensed season. I'll be surprised if he plays they're playing 72 games. I'd kind of be surprised if he played 60 plus, honestly. We'll have to see how he is physically throughout the season. But I mean, Lonzo, I'm not that big on Lonzo. I don't know how you feel about it. Ingram, he's definitely a real player. He's obviously an all-star, won most improved last year. They get Steven Adams. I think that was a pretty good pickup, especially because they lost Derek Favors. I think Adams is probably better. They get Kyra Lewis in the draft, which I think he's a pretty good bench player. They got Eric Bledsoe also through the trade for Drew Holiday. So, and they still have JJ Redick, who could just be a spot-up shooter and stuff like that. But I don't see them being good enough to leapfrog those other teams, but I still see them being in the play-in tournament.
Yeah, so I've got the Spurs and the Timberwolves as my nine. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I was about to say you got the Spurs.
No, I've got the same teams. I've got the exact same teams. I've got Suns 9, Pelicans 10. Basically everything you said. Booker's probably going to be the best player on that team. Paul's probably going to be the 2, Aiden the 3. I think I expect Aiden again to have the same stats as he did last year on the same 18 and 12, but on probably better efficiency, probably a few less shots a game. I didn't like their pick at 10, Jalen Smith. I thought it was a bit of a reach. I thought there were better options on the board. Again, Jay Crowder is a big pickup. I mean, he's always like a solid 6th or 7th best player on a team that's capable of getting to the finals. Last year he was on the Heat. He's been on the Celtics. He was on the Jazz. He's a solid player. Mikal Bridges is, again, a very solid player. Sarge is a solid player. They're a solid team. It just depends on, how efficient can Booker be? Is he the number one player on a winning team in general? I think that's something people have taken into question. I mean, he hasn't won in his career yet. So, his greatest accomplishment in the NBA right now is going 8-0 in the bubble. So, I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. That's just not much. That's really what it's going to come down to. I'm curious to see what happens. Is Chris Paul going to be a positive for this locker room? I would assume so. But, if you're Devin Booker and you're looking to start winning and Chris Paul comes in and tells you how to win, you kind of just think to yourself, wait, Chris Paul has literally won nothing. So, and he's the Hall of Famer. We'll see how everything goes. I think this team's going to be great. I might have them slightly low at number 9. I don't think I do. I could see them going past the Grizzlies. I don't know if I see them being better than the Jazz. I think the Jazz are just a better coached team. They're a better organization. I think Mitchell right now is probably slightly better than Booker, although I think Booker has potential to be better. He's a better offensive player. Mitchell's better defensively, though. Yeah, and on the Pelicans, I mean, they've got a solid roster. Obviously, Zion. You have to. If you're a Pelicans fan, you're hoping he's. Is it out of the question that by the end of this year he's a top 10 player in the league? I don't know that it is.
I would say. I mean, ESPN ranked him at like 19, which I thought was kind of high. I thought, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was top 15. I wouldn't say top 10. I'd say
right now he's a top. I would say from what we saw, he played like a top 30 player last year. From what we saw, the limited.
But I'm just limited saying, games. It's not enough film. I think you have to create a defense for him, which I think you can do. So I think it would be a top 15 player, but I don't know about top 10.
I would say I would be a little bit surprised if he was top 10, but I'm just saying it's possible. It's definitely not out of the question. I mean, other than Zion, though, they still have an incredible roster. Ingram is, he's like a borderline all-star player. If he was in the East, he'd be an all-star for sure. You got Steven Adams this year, and that's a big pickup. Eric Bledsoe, the Drew Holiday trade's not great. Ultimately, you're not going to replace him necessarily, but Eric Bledsoe's not a bad player. You're not necessarily worried about Eric Bledsoe's playoff woes because, you just want to make the playoffs in general. JJ Redick's obviously a three-point shooter. He can do everything. Well, he can do shooting. That's it, actually. Lonzo Ball, I'm probably bigger on Lonzo Ball than you are. He's a solid playmaker. We'll see how his shot is. I'm not sold on his three-point shot or his shot in general, but I still think he can be a solid playmaker on the court. Josh Hart's a solid bench piece. Kyra Lewis, I thought was a fine pick in the draft. Sure. We'll see how good Jackson Hayes is. I don't have much hope from what we've seen, but we'll see, I guess. I think this team ends up getting the 10 seed. I think it's big for the Pelicans to make the playoffs this year. You want to start getting that winning culture. You definitely don't want to be like a bottom feeder team this year. You've got all the pieces you really need to start building your team. I don't think you need another top pick. When you've got Zion, you've got Ingram, that alone should be enough to get you in the top 10. If that's not, that's bad. So yeah, I mean they're my tenth seed. I don't know how you want to do the whole like this now.
All right. Well, I was gonna say so just to repeat. So my 7, 8, 9, 10 is Warriors, Blazers, Suns, and then Pelicans. So
Mine is I've got
you say
Jazz, Grizzlies, Suns, Pelicans.
all right. So that's what we think at the end of the regular season. That's what it's gonna end up as. But when the playoffs actually start, so after the play-in games are done, I have it as Warriors 7, and I have the Suns as the 8 seed. I have them beating the Blazers in that game. So I have the Suns being the 8 seed, and then the Blazers just wouldn't make the playoffs.
All right. So can you repeat how that goes one more time just to make sure I have mine right?
So the 7 and 8 seed will play one game.
Yeah.
Whoever wins that game is the 7 seed. Whoever loses that game plays the winner of the 9-10 seed game.
Okay.
And then so the loser of the 7-8 and the winner of the 9-8, they
All right.
play.
Cool.
Whoever
Yep.
wins that game is the 8 seed.
Yep. Okay. I've got Jazz 7, Suns 8. So that essentially means that I have the Grizzlies losing to the Jazz and I have the Grizzlies losing to the Suns. I had the Suns beating the Pelicans to get in that playoff game. They end up beating the Grizzlies. So it's Jazz 7, Suns 8.
So ours are it's pretty getting in. It's just different teams at the room.
Yeah. I'd say we only had one different team, right? You had the Rockets and I didn't.
Well, you don't. Yeah, you just don't have the Rockets at all, which I mean, again, it depends on Harden. You're looking at it as if Harden's not going to be there. I'm looking as
I'm not even looking at it as that. I mean,
if James Harden's there, they're making the playoffs. I think that's. I'd be completely surprised if they didn't make the playoffs.
Maybe.
Harden.
I'm just not big on Harden. I'm not big on Harden. We'll see what happens. I don't know what happens. I don't think they make the playoffs.
All right. I mean, I'd be very surprised if that happens.
Whether it's similar to the AD situation where he just like stops playing. I mean, Harden's a hefty guy now. I don't think he really cares.
I think he could still get you 30 points, and I don't.
Oh, sure, he'll still be elite in the regular season, but I don't know. I just don't think he's a lock for the playoffs, even if he's on that team. Chemistry wise, I'm not looking forward to that team at all. But I mean, who knows? I still ultimately think Harden won't be on the team anyways, though. But yeah, we want to go finals teams now, or sorry, the Western Conference team.
Eastern Conference teams.
We're not going to give our final for the Western. We're going to go Eastern and then give finals.
We'll go Eastern and then we'll do our finals.
Okay. I'll let you go first, I guess, for 1 seed.
Yeah. All right. So for my 1 seed for the East, I have the Bucks. I mean, it's kind of a boring pick. Most people are thinking that there could be different picks for the 1 seed. I really see it as the Bucks, honestly. I think the improvements. I mean, they traded for Jrue Holiday, which is definitely an improvement for them. Anyways, with Giannis, won Defensive Player of the Year last year. Middleton's a good defender. Lopez is pretty good at in being a presence in the paint and blocking shots. So Jrue Holiday's only going to add to that. They didn't have to give up much, like in player-wise. They really just gave up picks. They also picked up Torrey Craig. They have Bobby Portis. These are guys who are going to make minimal contributions. DJ Augustine, a nice backup point guard for them. So again, they made minimal additions, and those guys. Jrue Holiday is obviously the biggest guy that they made. Giannis signed the extension, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's the first time we're talking about it, but I think it was the right move. I mean, I don't really see how it's the wrong move in any way. No matter what was going to happen, I think he works well in Milwaukee, and I think he's fine with that. He likes Milwaukee, so I don't see any problem with it. And yeah, I mean, I see them being the 1 seed in the East. The last 2 years they've been the 1 seed, and I see it happening again. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement here. I also have the Bucks at 1. I would be kind of surprised if it was any other team. I mean, obviously the Heat handled the Bucks pretty quickly there last year. I'll talk about the Heat later, but I might have the Heat a little bit lower than you. I think the Heat take a little bit. I mean, they were the 5 seed last year. I would not I would say it's like I don't know if it's likely, but I think there's a solid chance they end up back at the 5 seed or 4 seed again this year. Uh, the Drew Holiday pickup is big. You now know Giannis is here long term. You know you're in it for the long haul here with Giannis. The team's built around him. You just got to start winning in the postseason. I don't know if Budenholzer is the coach. I'm not a big Budenholzer guy. He's been the 1 seed many times. He was the 1 seed back in that Hawks team, but I don't understand like playing your star like 10 minutes a game. It just doesn't make any sense, especially in the postseason. I think Giannis averaged what, like 30 something, like low 30s minutes a game. He doesn't play his stars enough, or he spreads it out too much in the postseason and even sometimes in the regular season. But yeah, I mean the Bucks are still super talented. Giannis is as a dominant regular season player, just like a Harden or just like other players. This team is so good. The chemistry is there. You lose Bledsoe, but Bledsoe's garbage anyways, for the most part. So, I mean, he's not garbage, but I mean, you know what I mean. Like he's just not. I mean, he's not gonna. He's just not. He just wasn't good on the Bucks really. Well, in the playoffs at least, for sure, not in the playoffs. Holiday's a big upgrade. But yeah, I mean, I have the Bucks one. There's not really much to say. I'll let you go for the 2 seed because I think you'll enjoy my 2 seed prediction.
I mean, well, we'll see what it is, but I have a feeling maybe the Celtics, which would be a reach. But for my 2 seed, I have the Nets. It's kind of the same situation that the Lakers and Clippers are kind of in. It's like their team, obviously they didn't like make the finals last year or anything like that, but they're getting Durant back, Irving back. They both come from injuries. Obviously, KD's was way more severe than Kyrie's was, but they're not going to be playing that much in the regular season. Obviously they'll play the majority of the games, but they're definitely going to be sitting out games. But I think their team overall is definitely a pretty good team. Obviously they have LeVert, who I think is pretty good. He can give you like 15 a night and be solid for you. They have Torian Prince, DeAndre Jordan, Jared Allen. They have Joe Harris, Landry Shamet, who they got, who I think is going to be really well in their team. Spencer Dinwiddie. They picked up Jeff Green, who was pretty good last went halfway through the season, and he was pretty good in the playoffs. So I think just the players that they have besides Kyrie and KD are good enough to win games for you. Obviously, we saw that last year when KD didn't play the entire season. Kyrie basically missed the entire season, and they still made the playoffs. So adding those 2 players, you're only going to get better. And getting Shamet, getting a healthy Dinwiddie, still having those other pieces that they have. I have them being the 2 seed, and I think this is kind of where the top teams in the East, you can kind of mix and match and put them wherever you want, but I still see the Nets being the 2 seed.
So I've got the Raptors as my 2 seed.
Oh, the Raptors. Okay.
I think I'm probably high. I'm pretty high on the Raptors, I guess. I mean, having them as my 2 seed, I feel like is high enough. I would say they got worse in the offseason. You lost Gasol, which is unfortunate. You did lose Rondé Hollis Jefferson as well. You also lost Ibaka. Unfortunate losses. You did add Aaron Baines. I would say that's a solid pickup. I don't know that he's as good as Gasol or Ibaka. He's kind of a different player. That's kind of all you did in the offseason. So, I mean, we'll see. You also signed Alex Len. You drafted Malachi Flynn. I don't really know too much about him, but he's out of the people drafted between like 20 and 30. He's somebody that has gotten a lot of hype. We'll see if he even like plays that much. I still think the Raptors are an incredible team with an incredible coach, arguably the best coach in the NBA right now. Pascal Siakam is still, I mean, he looked horrible in the postseason for sure, but in the regular season again, I have no doubt he's going to be great. Lowry, I was not a big Lowry guy, but I mean, Lowry's done nothing but prove me wrong. He's such a gritty player. He's pretty chubby and stuff, and he looks pretty stupid, and he flops all the time. But, I mean, he's such a gritty player, and he's a player that if he was on my team, I mean, I'd probably love to have him. Van Vliet, you got back Van Vliet. I mean, that's big. You've still got you've got solid bench pieces. Anunoby is still, I expect Anunoby to be a lot better this year. I think he looks pretty good in the postseason. I would say he looks pretty good. There were times where in the Celtics series, he looked like Toronto's best player. especially with Siakam just not playing well at all. So that's big. I mean, Powell, you still have Powell. Obviously, Baines, like I said. I think this team's I don't know. I could definitely see them not being the 2 seed, but I'm not big on the Nets. I'm not super big on the Sixers. So it kind of leaves me for the Raptors here. I'm going to go the Raptors my 2 seed. I don't know, that it's by a lot of games, but I mean, I got the Raptors as 2 seeds. So
I think that's definitely a reach for them being the 2 seed. I definitely have them lower. But I mean, I'll talk about that when I get to them. But for my 3 seed, I have the Sixers. I think the improvements that they made in the off season were some of the best improvements that a team made throughout the league. Like I said, they got Seth Curry, they got Danny Green, they got rid of Al Horford's contract, which seemed kind of untradeable at a time. But they got Danny Green, who you could say what you want about him, but he's still a good shooter. He's a good player. He's been on championship teams. He brings leadership, and he can still play decent defense. Like I would say average defense, maybe a little bit better as he's gotten older. They get Tyrese Maxey in the draft. They still have Embiid, Simmons. They got Dwight Howard also in free agency, which I think is just another big guy that can kind of get you like 10 and 10 a night, and he could definitely play pretty good defense. And you still have Tobias Harris also. I think he knows his role. Obviously, he got paid way too much, but I think he can still get you 18 to 20 points a night. He has to be a better shooter. His efficiency has to go up in shooting wise. But I think if you could do that, they're fine. And this is the year to see if Simmons and Embiid can work. Now they may trade for Harden. Again, I'm assuming that they don't. I'm assuming that it's just Simmons and Embiid that are going to be on this team. They get Doc Rivers as new coach, new front office. You get Daryl Morey from the Rockets. He obviously made great transactions in the offseason, like I just said. So I think this is their final year to prove that Simmons and Embiid can work. I think they're going to both be a lot better than they've been in the past. So I think them being a 3 seed, I think it's the perfect spot for them. And in the playoffs, I mean, we're not talking playoffs, but I think the playoffs, they're going to be a real threat to most teams in the East.
yeah, I mean, sure. My 3 seed, I've got the Boston Celtics. So, I mean, we'll talk about Tatum. I'm much bigger on Tatum than you are. I would say, I don't even know that I'm not big on Tatum. I would just say you're just like not big on Tatum. I still think Tatum is an elite. I guess I'll call him a small forward. He's an elite small forward right now, in my opinion. He's not as good as Kawhi. He's not as good as LeBron, if you call LeBron a small forward. But I mean, Tatum's up there. He's going to be an all-star. I mean, he's the best player on the Celtics, and I don't even know that it's that close. Jaylen Brown, I expect him to get slightly better. He's probably the second best player, maybe the third best player in the Celtics. Kemba is still a solid point guard. He'll give you around 20 a game, and he's much better defensively than somebody like Isaiah Thomas was back in the day, even though he's not great. Marcus Smart, I mean, he might be the best defensive player in the league, at least at the guard position. You could argue he's so gritty. He's similar to Kyle Lowry, but probably not as good. He's better defensively, but probably not as good offensively. Not even close, probably. Marcus Smart's one of those players where if you're not a fan of him, like you hate him, but if he's on your team, you really enjoy him, and ultimately he contributes to a winning culture. Marcus Smart and others were bumping heads in the locker room last year. We'll see how things work out. If it does come to a point where the locker room stuff gets shaky and somebody has to be traded, let's say it's between Smart and Tatum. I mean, between Smart and anybody he was arguing with last year, it'd be Smart without a doubt, because it was definitely one of the best players in the team that he was butting heads with. I could see Smart getting traded this year. If you trade him, I still think you get something back to the point where it's not that big of a downgrade. You drafted Aaron Nesmith, a shooter. I think he'll fit in perfectly fine. Jeff Teague, I mean, okay. He'll be an upgrade at the backup position, a backup point guard position over Wanamaker for sure. He went to the Warriors. Tice is not everyone's favorite. I don't think he's going to start. He's not going to start this year. But again, I mean, he played perfectly fine in the postseason, but ultimately he's super small and he's not going to be able to guard somebody like an Embiid. You picked up Tristan Thompson in free agency. He's a solid pickup. He'll be able to rebound the ball. He'll be able to defend the center position. better than Tice for sure. I don't know how I loved the Peyton Pritchard pick. I mean, a lot of people have been super high on him since he's came to the Celtics from like a local perspective or whatever. I mean, I don't think he was going to play that much. Robert Williams. I mean, I'm getting super deep into the depth chart at this point, but Robert Williams, he's been hyped for multiple years now at this point. He's looked absolutely horrible in the preseason, and I've never been a big Robert Williams guy. Grant Williams, whatever. I mean, he's probably at the back of the rotation at this point. Langford, Carson Edwards, blah, 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 a bunch of garbage draft picks. Ultimately, though, I think Tatum, Brown, Walker, those three players are so good, and the bench might not be great. But I think ultimately they're a team that still has chemistry. Losing Gordon Hayward's unfortunate, but it's one less mouth to feed, as dumb as that sounds, in terms of like star players. Hayward at times could mess chemistry up because, you know, he's out for so long, then he's back, and then he's out again for so long. And even not even talking about that one ankle injury. Over the course of his whole time here at Boston, it's been injury after injury after injury after injury. And it's every single time when he'd come back to the Celtics, they'd get instantly worse. So they'd have to get that chemistry back, and they get better again, and they'd get to their peak, right? And then Hayward would get injured again, or somebody else would get injured again. And you'd have to just keep going through that. And you know, maybe they get better without Hayward there. I've got the Celtics at 3, though.
Yeah, I mean, I have the Celtics at 4, so it's not much different from 3. I just think I think right now they're probably worse than the Sixers are and the Nets are for sure. But you're right. I'm not big on Tatum. I think he's definitely a 1, but I'm not sure of how much. Like, I think there's different tiers of being a 1, like just specifically being a 1. There's like the ones like LeBron or what like Luka is going to be. Then there's the ones like Harden, who he's obviously the best player on the team, but he's not going to be able to elevate your team to take it to like a championship level without other surrounding pieces around him. And even then, he still comes up short, as we've seen. And I think most people think that Tatum's going to be one of the best players in the league, and I don't doubt that he's going to be that, but I just don't think he's that type of player. And so speaking of just the Celtics, though, I think Tatum, he's definitely still going to be your best player. He's going to be one of the best players in the league, but I don't think he's enough to take you to a championship type level. Jaylen Brown's definitely a really nice player. He can give you 20 a night and play really good defense, guard the opposing team's best player. Him and Smart can, depending on size. Kemba, he's not healthy. I don't even know when
that's true.
Coming back. So I think that's definitely something. They said they're going to update his status in January. I mean, he may not come back till February at some point. We don't really even know. So, and even if he does come back, he most likely won't even be 100% healthy for the entire season. I think that's going to hurt.
No, that's true.
Getting Teague can help, but he's not going to replace Walker. I think the Thompson pickup was a really nice pickup. He can play really good defense, and he can rebound the ball, which is something that they haven't had in a while. Someone that could defend at multiple positions, but obviously the center position, which they're going to have to do with Embiid, and even like Giannis possibly. But I thought that was a really good pickup. I think the Peyton Pritchard pick was definitely a mistake. I think they should have taken Tyrell Terry there. That would have been a great pick for them. Being a shooter, they would have got Neesmith, who's a shooter and can play some defense, but more of a shooter offensive type. And Tyrell Terry could be that guy off the bench that you could have if Kemba's going to be injured. He can come in and be a really nice bench player for them. So I think they missed on that pick. But I think they're still good enough to be the 4 seed in the East. But I just don't think they're the type of level to compete with the Nets. And if the Sixers are at their best, I still think they're below the Sixers at their best. So that's why I'm at 4. But again, when it comes to the playoffs, I'm not that high on them when it comes to the playoffs.
I ultimately would say, in terms of the regular season, for me, teams 2 through 6 are relatively interchangeable. If you told me my 6 seed was the 2 seed next year, I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be like, wow, that's definitely not happening. Like, I could see it happening. And I'll get into who my 6 seed is in a bit, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know if you feel the same way, but you probably have, like, at least a few teams that you would say, like, you could relatively kind of change them out. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'll get into my 4 seed. It's going to be, again, probably a relatively surprising pick. I have got the Miami Heat here. I'm not exactly sure how to feel about the Heat. I mean, obviously they played outstanding in the postseason last year. I don't know that that's the team that they're going to be going forward. Obviously, Butler, I think there were doubts about him, his whole career, starting in Chicago, then in Minnesota, especially when it was like, what's going on? Like, is he the locker room cancer, or is it Towns? Like, what's going on here? And it looked like he was done, not done, but like done is like the one. And he went to the Sixers, and that didn't work out. And it was like, what's going on? Like now we're sure it's Butler, right? Like it's Butler that's causing all this locker room drama. He goes over to the Heat as a definitive number one player, and next thing you know, this Heat team is going to the finals. Potentially even going to beat the Lakers in the finals and win the finals championship. I mean, I think Butler thrived in a situation where he was the definitive number one. I think he likes that. I think he wants to take that on. I think he wants to be the best basketball player on the team, or at least the presence there to be the number one. I think he butted heads with a lot of players. And that might be a negative or a positive. I don't know how you look at it. It depends. Because if you think Butler can be the number one on a championship winning team, then that's a positive. But if you think, ultimately he's going to have somebody there that's better than him, and if that's going to cause problems like it did in Philadelphia and probably Minnesota, then that's probably a negative. Because, I mean, for me right now, I think you need another piece there that's somebody that's probably equally as good to Jimmy Butler for this team to win a championship, or at least close to Jimmy Butler. And I fear that potentially this team gets to a point where if there is somebody like that, maybe it's, I don't know, I don't think it'd be Bam, but if they do get some other piece that comes here, and it wouldn't be Giannis because Giannis signed the extension, but let's just say in a hypothetical world, Giannis did sign with the Heat next year. Like, how is this all going to work out? Like, is it Butler's team? Is it Giannis's team? It's childish stuff. It's media stuff, but it's stuff that we've seen matters to Butler very much. If you've watched a lot of his interviews he's done, he's got stuff. He's got like segments with companies on like YouTube and stupid stuff like that. You can clearly see that it matters to him for sure. I think I listened to him on like the JJ Redick podcast, and listening to what he talked about from other teams. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that Heat locker room, but talking about them as my 4 seed at least. Butler's still a great player. I mean, Bam he took a leap. I mean, we've clearly seen that he's the third best center in the league. And who knows, he might even get better. That block on Tatum was one of the best defensive plays I've seen in a long time, especially in a moment like that. Hero, I mean, he emerged in the playoffs as well. And people hyped him up so way, way, way too much, but I mean, that doesn't mean he wasn't a great player for them in the postseason. Duncan Robinson is an average to above average starting small forward in the league. He's an absolutely lights out shooter. He might be the best shooter in the league other than Curry. Field goal percentage wise, he was the best last year, I'm pretty sure. You got Goran Dragic back this year. Again, that's huge. He was kind of like, he was a spark on that team. He meant a lot to the locker room there. So I think that was a big pickup, not pickup, but I mean, to get him back is big. I still think this team's great. I think Kendrick Nunn's a solid piece there as well. You got Avery Bradley, which is a solid pickup. I mean, he, in the regular season for the Lakers, meant a lot. I think when it was announced he wasn't coming to the bubble, a lot of people thought that was a big loss for the Lakers, and another reason that the Clippers were going to win. Ultimately, it didn't mean that much, but it went to show that Avery Bradley was enough for people to say, you know what, the Lakers don't have it. And I mean, he's going to be a great player for them. So yeah, I've got the Heat at 4. Ultimately, like I said, I could see the Heat being 3. I could see maybe even the Heat being 2. Who knows? I could see the Heat being 6. I could see the Heat being 5 as well. So.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I have the Heat at 5, so it's kind of similar. In that, I mean, I agree with the stuff that you're saying. I mean, they were the 5 seed last year. I don't really see them changing. I think they're going to be pretty similar. They didn't make huge additions. I think the Avery Bradley addition was a very good pickup because those first 8 games in the bubble that the Lakers played, they were terrible defensively. And that's obviously because Bradley didn't go to the bubble, and it showed. Now, when it came to the playoffs and getting deeper in the rounds, it didn't matter as much. They definitely improved on their defense when it came to that. But for those first 8 games, it was really showing that he was actually kind of a big loss for them. So I think getting him is going to be big. They did lose Jay Crowder. He went to the Suns, as we said before, which I think can definitely hurt a bit. But if Hero and Robinson can step up just a little bit, um, and perform the way that not perform the way they were playing in the playoffs, but just perform at a little bit of a better level, that kind of makes up for that loss anyways. Um, I think the hype around Hero is too much also. He's definitely a good player. He's not a great player or anything like that. He's going to give you 13 to 15 points. His defense is never going to be good, but he's always going to be able to make plays and shoot the ball at a high level. Butler's he's not on a championship level team. He's not a number one. Obviously, saying that they made the finals last year, but
Would
he's
you
not a
say
number one guy.
would you say that he's on a similar tier to Tatum, or like not play style or anything, but like on that like one tier would like because I wouldn't put Harden in the same tier as Tatum, as weird as that sounds. Even though I agree Harden's not on the same tier as LeBron, I don't know what tier I would have Harden on, but I would say Tatum is similar to Butler in the way that like he might not be the two, but like you'd have to have somebody about equally as good as him at least on that team, like
Yeah,
right?
no, I mean, yeah, that's what I'd say also.
Yeah.
Like when I was saying Harden and Tatum, it's that on the level, on the tiers of being a number one, like I'd put into two tiers where you have like the supreme number one, like a Kawhi, a LeBron, a Luka who's going to be like that. And then you have like the lower end of that tier, which I think is the guys who are clearly the best player, but they're just not good enough on their own to lift the team to get to a championship or to lift the entire team to be really consistent and get to the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah.
Young enough where he can obviously improve on that. Harden, you could obviously see he's old enough where you know that he's not that type of player. Butler, I mean, Butler is not the type of player that Tatum is, I'd say. Tatum at his best versus Butler at his best, I'd pick Tatum. Just looking at them 1v1, but on a team setting, Butler's definitely a really good option because if you put pieces around him like Dragic, Bam, Hero, Robinson, you just get pieces around him, then the entire team gets better because he's even though people think he may be a selfish type player, he's definitely unselfish in that he definitely wants to take the shots, but he's okay with. I mean, Dragic and Bam were arguably their best players throughout the playoffs. You could say over Butler. I mean, the impact that they both had and them both being out in the finals. I mean, if Dragic and Bam were playing the finals, I'm not saying the Heat would have won that series, but it went 6 without them basically. I think it easily could have won 7, and they definitely could have won that series if you get a healthy Dragic and Bam. So I have them kind of going back to the regular season standings. I have them as the 5 seed. And I think they'll kind of be similar to what they were last year in the regular season. And I mean, we'll see what happens in the playoffs. But I mean, I have them as my 5 seed, which I think is reasonable for most people.
The 5 seed, I've got the Nets. It's probably a little bit low. I just don't know how strong out of the gate that this team's going to be. Obviously, KD, before he got injured, he was definitively the second best player in the league, maybe the third, but I would say 95% of people thought he was the second best player in the league. Kyrie, at his height was a top 10 player in the league. I'd still say he's probably a top 20 player, although that's more talent-wise. I would say with the locker room shenanigans, I mean, he could, in all honesty, he could be, who knows? He could be, I don't know. Like, Kyrie is one of the most difficult players in the league. I don't know exactly how to feel about him. Obviously in the Celtics, he was like, I'd say he was not the problem, but he was a big problem and why the team underperformed a lot. His locker room shenanigans. Did you see that video of him at TD Garden in the preseason with like what was it again? It was like so stupid. It was like
it's like the Native American like smoke. I forget what it's called. Like,
yeah, but he was like burning sage or whatever across the court. I just like this stupid like flat earth type of stuff that only Kyrie would do. And it's like, it's not, I don't even think he's doing it for like, cause he genuinely believes in anything. I think he's just doing it for like he wants to be unique and he wants to like, I don't know. I think it has to do with him being like the LeBron understudy. And now he just wants to do stuff to be unique. And I don't even know what it is, but he's so confusing. I could see him just going off the rails at any point. Same with KD. They're very sensitive players, but ultimately they're both, talent wise, they're both top 10, top 15 in the league. Durant being top 3, top 4. Uh, and around them, you still have a fairly decent roster. Karis LeVert's a piece. He's a piece for sure. Allen's a solid center. Joe Harris shoots the ball. Dinwiddie is going to be a solid, probably off the bench player. I mean, he's going to play. He's going to be off the bench. Jordan, DeAndre Jordan, whatever you think of him. I mean, he's at least a player on an actual roster in the league. Shamit's solid as well. Torian Prince, I mean, also solid. I still think this team. I guess I'm slightly lower on them than you are. I think this team could be the 2 seed. It really depends on how strong they come out the gate. Again, it is only 72 games, so if they do get it together by the All-Star break, they're not going to have as many games necessarily to, capitalize on with their chemistry. I'm very scared of this team, as a Celtics fan / if I were a Nets fan, because this team has potential to do so well, but they also have potential to kind of like have locker room problems. And if one thing doesn't go their way, then Kyrie throws a fit. And the Brooklyn media, I mean, we'll see, whatever, the New York / Brooklyn media, whatever happens, like there's always potential for KD to just go off the rails and start going on his stupid rants. I don't even know his burner accounts, all this stuff. I don't know exactly how to feel about the team, but I've got them at 5. I think they end up somewhere around there. So.
All right, yeah, I'm definitely higher on them than you are, it seems, but I mean, I guess it could end up at 5 if something drastic happens. But for my 6 and 7 teams, I'm kind of gonna put them into 1 because I think they could easily be replaceable. 1 could be 6, 1 could be 7. I could see it either way. So right now, I have the Raptors at 6 and the Wizards at 7. I would not be surprised if the Raptors were 7, the Wizards were 6. I think the Raptors. So you're very high on them, which I don't agree with at all. They did not get better. They definitely got worse in the offseason, losing Ibaka and Stall. They got Van Fleet back. Lowry is definitely declining. Siakam, we don't know. It seemed like he was going to be like a top 20 player going into last season. Now, not really sure on what he's going to be because of how bad he performed in the playoffs. And he was also injured a little bit last year, but it was really just how bad he was in the playoffs last year. The Wizards, they get Westbrook, they get rid of Wall. I think that's definitely an upgrade. They get Denny Avdija. That's a 9th pick. Rui Hachimura is their pick last year. I think he's a solid piece. Obviously, Bradley Beal. He averaged 30 points last year. He's probably not going to average 30 this year, but he's definitely going to get you, 27 points a game. Be probably more efficient playing with Westbrook. You have Thomas Bryant, who I think is actually a pretty good center. If you look at him, he can hit threes. He doesn't shoot many of them, but when he does, he actually hits them. He can get you like 13 to 15 points. He's an okay rebounder. He's not, he's like 7 foot. He doesn't really play like a 7-footer, but I don't think that's the worst thing. They got Robin Lopez as a backup center, which I actually think he's a pretty good backup center. I think he would have been a good fit for the Celtics, but then they got Tristan Thompson, which definitely is an upgrade. But Robin Lopez wouldn't have been a bad option for the Celtics. And Westbrook, I think people are definitely down on him last year. He was injured and he had COVID for the playoffs. Before the playoffs, but I think that was just draining on him. And the culture, as we've seen in articles that have come out in Houston, culture was not good at all, not to what he is accustomed to. So I think him being out of there definitely helps him, and I think it'll help the Wizards team. So I wouldn't be surprised if they end up as the 6th seed. Again, I'm not high on the Raptors at all. I think the only reason I do have them as the 6th seed is because of Nick Nurse and the culture that they have there. I think they're just a winning organization, as we've seen these last couple of years. So I still put them over the Wizards, but again, I would not be surprised if the Wizards would be 6 and Raptors would be 7.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm high on the Raptors is, again, it's the culture, and I ultimately think, I'm not a big Pascal Siakam guy in the playoffs necessarily, but in the regular season, I still think he's going to be a top 25 player, top 20 player maybe. I still think Kyle Lowry is a great player as well. But for my 7 seed, I've got the Pacers. I'm not exactly too sure how to feel on the Pacers.
Who's your 6th seed?
Oh, sorry. Jesus. I just completely skipped. I don't know. Sorry. My 6th seed, I've got the Sixers. Sorry to that was messed up. I just looked at the 7 instead of the 6. But for the Pacers, sorry, for the Sixers, oh my God, what is going on with me? I mean, this is the last year for Simmons and Embiid. I'm not. I mean, trading Horford, I would say, is probably a plus. He just didn't fit on the roster, and I think the thought philosophy was, hey, like we're gonna play the Celtics a lot in the regular season and probably in the playoffs. The number one roadblock for against the Celtics was Horford because he was a good defender against Embiid. So like if you can't beat him, then just recruit him, I guess, poach him from the Celtics. Ultimately, that was a horrible contract. At the time, I was kind of surprised Horford left the Celtics, but when I saw the contract, I was like, yeah, I mean, I was definitely not expecting it at all. It was super unexpected at the time, but I mean, they paid him so much money and for many, many more years than I would have been comfortable with. So ultimately, it was a good decision to not sign him. Around Simmons and Embiid, you got Doc Rivers this year. You did get Curry. You got Howard. You got Danny Green as well. You drafted Tyrese Maxey. Tobias Harris is, he's overpaid, so overpaid. But again, he's still a very solid player. He's a solid starter on a good NBA team. I'm probably low on this team. Uh, I don't. I'm not. It's weird because I'm not necessarily low on Simmons or Embiid, but I just don't love them together. I think Simmons needs to improve offensively, especially shooting. He's still an incredible playmaker. He's an incredible passer. He creates plays for everybody else. Around the paint, he's great still. Driving, he's fine. But again, it's just shooting. Like you're not going to be able to be. I don't even know if you could be a two, or I don't know if you could be a two if you can't shoot the ball. Like it's just the reality of it. Like we've seen that in the playoffs, similar to what happened to Rondo when he was the only player on the Celtics those years after like the Nets trade and stuff. It's like people can just sag off him, and it makes it so much harder for him to be a playmaker. And to keep the defense honest is really big. I'd like to see him start shooting some threes and actually, making them. Even if he's like, he may not even be as good of a shooter as Giannis, but if he can keep the defense honest, that means so much for the 76ers and for, Ben Simmons and everybody around him. I've got them as a 6 seed. That's probably slightly low. I still think Embiid's the second best center in the league. He does have some injury problems, like historically speaking, and he's not going to play all 72 games. That's a fact. So I mean, we'll see how things play out. If they get Harden, I don't know that my seeding changes that much, to be honest. Again, like I've said, this team could be third. I don't know. I think 2 through 6 are all going to have very similar records. So yeah, I mean that's
All right, and then so you had Pacers 7. So just to
yeah. I
get
guess hold on. I'll quickly talk about the Pacers at 7. I guess yeah. I have Pacers at 7. They fired Nate McMillan. They hired Nate Bjorkgren or whatever, however you say that. Their roster is very difficult. This roster could look completely different by the time this year is even over. They could just decide to blow it up. They could trade Oladipo. They could trade Turner. I don't think they're going to trade Sabonis, but I mean, who knows? I don't think they will. But I could definitely see Oladipo and Turner be traded. It's been talked about for a long time about Turner and Oladipo. Right now, you could argue T.J. Warren might even be their best player. He had a great bubble, and he definitely played well in the postseason. So, I mean, we'll see how things go. I don't think this team's going to be as good as it was last year, getting the 4 seed, but I still think this team's very solid. Malcolm Brogdon, Doug McDermott. I mean, this team's solid. I think they're the definition of like a solid NBA team. I don't think they have any ones. They probably don't even have any twos, but they've got some threes and some fours, B players, and I think overall they kind of fit together. There's not many egos other than probably Oladipo, so I think it works out. I think they get the 7 seed.
All right, just to speed it up a little bit, I'm gonna just say my 8, 9, 10. So I have Pacers at 8, Hawks at 9, and Magic at 10. Um, I'm definitely not high on the Pacers at all. I think they probably do end up trading someone, if not Oladipo and Turner. But let's say they don't. They're just not a good enough basketball team in order to be one of the top teams in the East. Um, and looking at the Hawks, just to kind of go through the teams, they made big additions, getting Rondo, Chris Dunn, Danilo Gallinari. They got Clint Capella last year, Naka Okongwu in the draft. They still have John Collins, Trey Young. They got Bogdan Bogdanovic. They still have Cam Reddish, Kevin Herter. What's the other guy's name?
You say Hunter already?
Yeah, Hunter, DeAndre Hunter. That's what I was forgetting. They have a lot of pieces. Like that's a good 10-man rotation. Maybe be like 11 or 12. I'm not even sure how many players it is. But the only problem I have with them, at least for the seeding wise, is that Trey Young he's not a good enough. He's not good enough to be your best player on your team. He's going to put up 30 and 11 or 30 and 10 in points assists. He's not going to play defense at all, which is why they got Rondo and Dunn, obviously. But if he's going to be your number one player, he's going to have to trust his teammates way more than. I mean, again, last year their team wasn't great last year, but with the additions that they've made, if he doesn't put more trust into his teammates this year, it's going to be a struggle for them, honestly, because if he's taking all the shots and making all the decisions, I don't trust him with the ball, honestly, that much. And with the veterans that he has around them, he needs to give the ball to them and have them make plays because he Collins, they can make plays without having Trey Young have the ball for 70%, 80% of the game. So if that can happen, then I'll definitely be higher on them. And then for the Magic, I mean, for the 10 seed, if you look at the teams that are left in the East, the Magic, it's between them and the Bulls, maybe the Hornets, but I would say probably not. I just put the Magic there. I don't really have anything to say about them. They're not. I'll just tell you they're not going to make the playoffs in the play-in tournament. So that's kind of why I put them there. They're just there.
You have them. So wait. So your 8 is. Can you repeat the order again?
My 8 is Pacers. My 9 is Hawks, and my 10 is Magic.
Okay. All right, so I've got my 8, 9, 10 is Wizards, Magic, Hawks. I mean, Magic, yeah, I think for the most part we agree. They've got some like C plus, B minus players, but overall, I mean, they're just not. The Hawks quickly, I had them as my 10. Trey Young's great. Again, the defensive part is he's one of the worst, if not the worst defender in the league right now. The team's not built around him to really hide that either, really. I mean, you did bring in Dunn and Rondo, but how often will Dunn and Young be playing at the same time? I'm sure they will be at times, but is this team built to be able to effectively hide Young, potentially like maybe the Warriors were solid at hiding Curry for a while, and even then Curry was a much better defender than Young is right now? No. So yeah, I mean, I've got the Hawks at 10, Wizards at 8 quickly. I mean, it's just Russell Westbrook is, I don't love Westbrook at all, but in the regular season, he just puts up too much stats. And he's not an efficient player necessarily, but he's too efficient to not make the playoffs most likely, especially if it's 10 seeds and you got the play-in tournament. Like he's just too efficient not to. Beal, I mean, it's Bradley Beal. I don't know. Like, so yeah, I mean that team will make the playoffs for sure. At least the play-in tournament. Do you want to go play-in tournament then and sort that out right now?
Yeah, so just to repeat, I have Wizards 7, Pacers 8, Hawks 9, Magic 10. So for the 7 seed for the playing tournament, I have the Wizards being the 7 seed. I have them beating the Pacers and them securing the 7 seed. I have the Hawks beating the Magic in the 9-10 matchup, and I have the Hawks beating the Pacers, and I have the Hawks being the official 8 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, so I've got Pacers and Wizards. It was my exact same 7-8. I have Magic and Hawks not making it in.
Do you think Pacers are going to beat the
So Pacers win against the Wizards, but then the Wizards win against the Hawks.
Okay.
So the Magic, I mean, they lose.
Yeah, we both have the Magic missing it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Magic. I don't know what else to say. Like, okay, so do we want to go into awards now or finals?
Well, let's just give a recap of our picks. So
Okay.
So we'll start Western Conference again. So I have Nuggets 1, Clippers 2, Lakers 3, Mavericks 4, Rockets 5. Again, that's if Harden stays there the entire year. Jazz 6, and then this is like our playoff seeding. So I have Warriors 7, and then Suns 8. That's for the playoffs. That's what I have.
All right, Western. I've got Nuggets 1, Lakers 2, Clippers 3, Mavericks 4, Blazers 5, Warriors 6, Jazz 7, and Suns 8.
Yeah, those are playoff
Yeah.
seedings, not just regular season. And then for Eastern Conference, I have Bucks 1, Nets 2, Sixers 3, Celtics 4, Heat 5, Raptors 6, Wizards 7, and then Hawks 8.
Yeah, I've got Bucks 1, Raptors 2, Celtics 3, Heat 4, Nets 5, Sixers 6, Pacers 7, and Wizards 8.
All right, so I think we'll do finals predictions now. So do you want to start?
Um, sure. I'll start with my Western Conference team. It's a boring pick, but it's the Lakers. I just there's just I don't think any team really competes except for probably the Clippers. The Mavs just aren't there yet. Luka may be there, but the rest of the roster isn't. Especially, there's no AD on the Mavericks, not even close. Kristaps isn't close to that, and the rest of the roster still is not what the Lakers are. On the East, it's a very difficult decision. I leaned Bucks, but ultimately I wasn't too sure. I mean, Nets too. I wasn't exactly sure about them. I'm pretty down on the Nets though. I'm going with the Celtics. And I mean, obviously, I'm a Celtics fan. I mean, not obviously, but if you didn't know, I'm a Celtics fan. So it's probably maybe a homer pick. I'm not in love with any of the teams in the East. I think the Nets are probably a very scary team, as a Celtics fan, but I also think they have the potential to just not be nearly as good as everyone thinks they will be. The Bucks, I won't waste too much time, but I think it's very easy to game plan around Giannis. I don't know if Drew Holiday makes the difference or not. The Celtics may be a very homer pick. It definitely is a homer pick. I mean, they're my favorite team, but I think Celtics. If not Celtics, then Bucks or Nets.
All right, who do you have winning in how many games?
I've got the Lakers winning, and I think they make it relatively quick. I think it ends in 5. The Lakers are just so good. LeBron, AD. I mean, you could argue LeBron and AD is the best duo of NBA history, and you could right now.
No,
You could make that
that's
argument.
kind of really.
No, you
There's
could.
no.
And
There's
I'm
no
not saying
way.
historically, like obviously, Jordan and Pippen have accomplished much more,
You
but
said historically.
no, like of all time, like
I mean, of
most,
all. Are you saying all time or right now?
no, like of all time. But I'm not like I'm okay. I'm saying Jordan and Pippen have accomplished more and will accomplish more than they will ever accomplish. Like they won 6 rings, but
I know what you're saying. You're not even saying just accomplishments. You're saying just 2 players, right?
yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
I would say Magic, Kareem, or Kobe and Shaq are way better.
I don't know about way better. I really don't know about way better.
Way better. Just
Mm,
them two, and I mean, you could Oscar Robertson and
no,
Kareem. I mean, you could say that.
no, I wouldn't. I
There's
wouldn't.
arguments for so many other
I mean,
players.
LeBron's not necessarily in his prime, and I'm not wasting too much time on this, but LeBron right now is the best player in the league in AD's top 5. And I know that's not necessarily a lot to say because a lot of the duos that was the case too for them, but I mean, I would say let's compare them to 2001, 2000 Lakers, something like that. Like, I would say
Well,
Shaq might be
let's not get into that because we'll just go
okay.
down
Okay,
a whole
yeah,
different
you're right.
discussion.
Okay,
But whatever, we disagree about that. But for all right, so for mine, I'll start with Western Conference. I also have the Lakers. I was trying to convince myself to pick someone else, but the way that the standings, it's the Lakers would face the Clippers in the second round, and I think they'd win. And then if they were to face the Nuggets or the Mavericks, I think that'd be a much easier series than the Clippers series would be. So I have the Lakers getting to the finals. And in the East, I have the Nets. I'm definitely higher on the Nets than you are. I don't see the Celtics getting there. I don't think they're good enough unless Kemba comes back and he's 100% healthy, which I don't think will happen either. I have the Nets getting there, and I I think their biggest competition would probably it depends on what the Sixers are, if they're actually the team that we think they can be. If not, then the biggest competition would be the Bucks, and I just don't think they'd have. It'd definitely be a tough series, but I don't think they'd have much trouble with the Bucks. So I'd go Nets. So in the finals, I have so Lakers Nets. I have the Nets winning in 7 games, which may be a surprise, but I'm I'm putting my faith in that Kyrie's going to be healthy and he's going to be the player that he was a couple of years ago. And I don't really have a problem with KD. I think he'll be fine. So it will be a tough series. That's why it's 7 games. And I could definitely see the Lakers winning. I think if they were to face each other, it definitely goes 7 games, no matter who would win. But I have the Nets winning.
Yeah, I just disagree. I just think I'm lower in the Nets. I don't know that KD is going to be the second best player in the league definitively like he was prior.
He'll still be top 5, though.
That's a big drop, though.
That's not a big drop because he's coming off a torn Achilles and he's over 30.
But I'm just
That's
saying,
not a big
like,
drop.
I mean, well, to me, that's a big drop because you said he's going to be fine. I mean, he'll be fine.
But
is he going to be?
No, I'm saying he'll be fine in that. Like, I don't need to worry about him doing what he has to do on the court. I worry more about Kyrie and seeing if he can perform the way that he was in 2016.
Sure.
Which I know was 5 years ago, but if he can get back to a level like that where you can count on him to hit big shots and be able to put up 30 any given night, even like 35, along with KD, I think you're in a good position if he can live up to that. And that's why I said if he can, then I have them winning the finals.
I think for the Nets to win the finals, KD would have to return to whatever you want to say, whatever year you want to say his prime is. I think he'd have to return to that. I think there's maybe a chance he does. I don't see it happening. And with Kyrie, I think, again, for them to win the finals, he'd have to return to 2016 Kyrie. For me, that's too much of a gamble to take to predict that. I mean, it's possible, but I personally put that as a very slim chance. I'm not big on those two players, to be honest. I think, everything considered, that's going to be tough for them to do, especially because they're just two very, like, volatile, like, soft kind of players. And that's not even necessarily a shot at them. It's just, I mean, they're tougher than I'll ever be. I'm just, relatively speaking, to LeBron and to, a lot of other players are just, I mean, KD's got the burner accounts and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. I just don't see it happening, but I mean, who knows? I could definitely see the Nets making the finals. I would be very surprised if they beat the Lakers.
I mean, again, I said I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers won either, but I think it would definitely be a tough
If the
series.
Nets won, would that mean KD's better than LeBron? So.
No, that wouldn't mean that. I never thought that. Like, I'm not a big LeBron guy, but I never thought that anyone was better than him. No, I never thought that.
So if you're predicting that, then, like, I mean, who on the Lakers would be, like, taking the blame for that one, would you say?
Well, I mean, obviously LeBron would. I mean,
well, I'm not saying technically, but in your mind, like who
it would come down to Davis. It would be how good would Davis be?
Okay. And so you would say,
because I think last year if he had to face Bam, he would have trouble facing Bam. I don't think he would have been terrible, but I think he would have had a lot more trouble than he did.
Sure,
and
maybe.
I think it's not like they have a great defender like a Bam, but they have like a Jordan or an Allen. Maybe a Prince could maybe guard him. Maybe a Jeff Green could also guard him. Maybe get someone, who knows. But
well, I mean, you lost me.
I'm not saying stop them. I'm saying guard them.
No, I know.
You're never going to stop a great player, but if you can just force him to take bad shots and be able to have struggles from the field, then that's all you need to do. You're like, a great player is always going to get 25 points, but if you can just make him do it on like 15 shots or something like that, or 18 shots, something like that, then it definitely makes it harder for them to score and be the player that they are. So that's all I'm saying.
I think I'm higher on Davis than you are probably. I'm not saying you're low on Davis, but I think I'm probably a little bit higher. I think as long as you surround Davis with some competent players and some competent ball handlers, he's a top 5 player in the league. And you might even agree with that, but I think he might even be higher than top 5. But I mean, who knows? I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that next year he might be better than Giannis. And that's probably because I'm low on Giannis, but
no, I think AD by himself is we saw it for 7 years.
Well, but did you listen to what I said though? About the whole
players?
You have to surround him with some competent ball players.
The Pelicans had competent players.
I mean,
you can't say the Pelicans
maybe you have to say
put talent around him. They had talent around him. He's not a number 1 guy. That's all. He's not a true number 1. He's always a number 2. That's why he went to the Lakers.
Well, but is he even the number?
What?
I don't even know. I would say he's more of like a 1B, but
no, he's a number 2.
I would say Kyrie was a number 2.
No, well, yeah, I mean, definitely, but
yeah, but I would not put
in the same situation.
I would disagree. I I say
Kyrie
I
for
would.
4 years. No. Listen, Kyrie for 4 years he was on a terrible team when he was the best player. Now they didn't have as good of pieces as AD, but AD made the playoffs twice, and he made it past the first round once and got swept. And he had way better players than Kyrie had for 4 years, and he was a better player than Kyrie was during that time period. That's all I'm saying.
The Pelicans organization is garbage. It's starting to look slightly better now, but even then, I'm not exactly sure. It took the Lakers like all of their farm system essentially for them to kind of turn the corner and get them and them to get lucky in the lottery. So we'll see on that. It's kind of the nature of like the position. Like AD is like he's like a power forward, but more of a center. I mean, he's not necessarily a center, but he's that type of player where it's like that person by themselves is not going to be able to like compete. Like Jokic by himself is not competing.
But he's
Embiid by
different than
himself
Jokic, though.
is not competing.
But he's different than those players. Those players are
I'm
true
not saying
centers. He's a
I'm
power
not saying
forward.
he's similar. I'm just saying like I would lump
But
him in that
he's
same category where it's like them by themselves with little help. They're not going far.
all right. We'll end the discussion, but he never had little help. That's all I'm going to say. And he's different players
Okay.
than those two guys are.
All
But
right. Last thing
whatever.
before I end it is if you put Jokic on those teams, he's not doing much better. Same with Embiid.
No, he'll do worse, obviously. I know AD's a better player than they are, of course, because he's a ball handler. Those guys aren't ball handlers. Like Jokic is, but I'm saying, you know what I mean? Like he's not the
Yeah.
same type of player that AD is with the ball. But whatever. We'll end it there.
Yeah.
We'll get into our words. I think we'll save MVP for last. So we'll start with Coach of the Year. We'll start. So do you want me to start? Or do you want to start?
I guess I'll start. I'll keep it short. I'm going Mike Malone here. Just by going off the seeding, he's the number one seed on the Western Conference. It's a relatively surprising result if that were to happen. He's definitely on paper a less talented roster than the Lakers. So yeah, I'll go Mike Malone. I think it's if the Nuggets get the number one seed and the Bucks get the number one seed, it's almost like the default pick to go Malone here for the Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I went with Mike Malone also. Assuming they get the number one seed, and the Bucks get the number one seed, you're right. Like it'd be Malone who gets it. But even no matter who would get it in the Eastern Conference, who would get the number one seed, if the Nuggets were to get the number one seed in the West, I think he'd get Coach of the Year.
All right. What do you want to do next? Do you want to go?
We'll do most improved player. We'll go
All
most improved player, defensive player of the year, rookie of the year, then MVP. So we'll do most improved player.
All right. Do you want to start on most improved or?
Yeah, so I think mine may be a little bit of a shock, only because his team's not going to be that good, but I think he's going to be a lot better than he was. I'm going to go with RJ Barrett of the Knicks.
That's definitely not a biased pick at all.
Well, it's not biased. I wouldn't say it's biased. Even though I'm a Knicks fan, I wouldn't say it's biased, but he didn't even make an all-rookie team last year, which I think is a little ridiculous. I think he averaged 14 points a game last year. I mean, it wasn't on great efficiency, and obviously they weren't great, but to not make out of 10 rookies to have him not on that list, one of those two teams that's a little crazy. New coach. You could see in the preseason. I mean, I would assume you probably aren't watching Knicks preseason, but I have. He's looked a lot better. He's more confident in his jumper, and he's more assertive with the ball. And I think that's what Thibodeau does. If you see Jimmy Butler, he had a young Jimmy Butler, and he turned him into the player that he is now. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, along with his work ethic that Jimmy Butler has, but without having Thibodeau as coach, that would have made a huge difference if he wasn't. So I think with that, he'll be I think his efficiency will be better, and his stats across the board will be better. And I think people will notice and see that he can be the top pick that he was when he was drafted third. So I think that's why.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's not as bad of a pick as I let on initially. I think it's a fine pick. I'm going with Michael Porter Jr. I think, I mean, for them to be the one seed, he has to be at least in the conversation. He might not win it, but I think he's a fairly safe pick for most improved player. I'm going to assume he stays on the Nuggets for this year. If he just gets better defensively to the point where you can have him on the court for 30 plus minutes and also have him in the court for, the final minutes of games, his points, all of his stats will improve. And I think his efficiency will be very solid. I mean, he was a steal of a pick at 13th in the draft or whatever it was. I think it was 13th a couple of years ago. Absolute steal of a pick. Even if he doesn't turn out like at this point in time, you could have traded him for much more than the 13th pick of the draft. So Yeah, I've got MPJ as my most improved.
All right. So for defensive player of the year, I have Anthony Davis. I was trying to find someone to pick other than like Davis, Gobert, Giannis, but they're really it's hard to like pick someone else. Um, like some people may try and pick Marcus Smart. I just don't think he's good defensively, but he's not that good defensively. And I could easily go with Giannis again. His ratings, if we go to like the metrics of his defense, is insane. But I think it will be Davis. He was very close last year. It was probably closer than people may have expected, honestly. And I think even though I'm not sure how many games he's going to play this year, I think he'll be so. I think he'll be too dominant defensively, where I think he'll win the award no matter what.
I'm going with Giannis for defensive player of the year. Again, it's the same exact thing. Like it could really be any of those players that you mentioned. I think it ends up being Giannis. I mean, I'm predicting them as a number one seed. I think Giannis will be probably just the same defensively, if not maybe slightly better. Who knows? Um, I'm really just going to default it to Giannis. It could be Davis. I'm just happening to go with Giannis here. So
For rookie of the year, I'm not sure where you're gonna go, but I'm going Lamelo Ball. It's like the media pick. It seems like everyone's picking him for rookie of the year, which is kind of why I didn't want to pick him. But when looking at it, he's gonna have the ball most of the time. Even though they have Devontae Graham and Terry Rozier, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe one of them or both of them even gets traded. I mean, you have to see what happens, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of them gets traded. Even though they have Gordon Hayward, I think LaMelo Ball is the attraction. He's gonna be taking. He's confident enough where he can take shots. Like he's not like Lonzo where he's not going to take any shots, and he's as good of a passer. Obviously, defensively he's not great, but no one really cares about that for rookie of the year. So I think he's going to put up numbers for a team that's going to be below 500, but he's going to put up good numbers and he's going to highlight real plays, which is all that really matters. It seems like for rookie of the year. So I mean, I tried not to pick him, but it was kind of hard not to pick him.
this is the one that again, yeah, like I didn't want to go Lamelo Ball. So I'm actually going to go with Nico Mannion here. Great pick by the Warriors, 48th overall. No, I'm kidding. So again, like I didn't know who to pick here, and I really want to pick Lamelo Ball, but for the sake of not picking Lamelo Ball, I won't. I think this draft is, reportedly, and I would agree, is just not it's not the same as the year before this year's. There's no Zion, there's no Ja, there's no. So, and I think out of the top 3 or 4, whatever, like LaMelo's in the best place to get rookie of the year. Like he's going to have the ball much more than like an Anthony Edwards or a James Wiseman. Do I want to change it? Yeah, I'm just gonna go LaMelo Ball. I can't pick anybody else. I was tempted to go with like a Cole Anthony or something, or like a Killian Hayes, but I can't.
Yeah.
I was really tempted for Killian Hayes, but I'm gonna go LaMelo.
I was thinking Killian Hayes also, but the only thing is they paid Grant. They have Griffin. It's going to be tough for him to. I think it's going to be tough for him to have the ball as much as LaMelo is. If like Griffin wasn't there, then I'd probably go Killian Hayes because I think he's definitely going to be he's going to be one of the best players out of this draft. But
I'd assume so. It's also very risky though.
Yeah, no, it is, but I think I think he's the most potential to be the best player out of this draft.
Yeah.
When looking at it, but he's on the worst team, so it doesn't really help. But again, I think it would be LaMelo. So
yeah, if this was like betting with odds and stuff, like if there were like odds for this, I mean, I definitely wouldn't go LaMelo because I'm sure he's by far the favorite. I would go like Killian Hayes, but yeah. I have to go LaMelo. There's no reason for me to go against LaMelo there.
Yeah. All right. So last one. So MVP. So I'm gonna go Luka Doncic. I believe that this will be I think this will be the year that he'll win. It sounds weird to say he's only been in the league 2 years, but this will be like the year that he does win MVP. It'll be the first of many. He'll probably win multiple MVPs. It'll be between him and Giannis probably for the next couple of years. But based off last year, I think he averaged like 39-9 or 29-9, something like that. He's most likely only going to be better, especially efficiently. 3-point shooting, he's like a 30% 3-point shooter, 31% 3-point shooter, which I don't think people really realize. But I think he'll be better if he can get to 33, 34%. It'll be it will just improve everything. Obviously, I'd assume he'd be taking the same amount of threes, even more threes per game. So his points per game would probably go up. He's playing with a couple better shooters outside, and Porzingis is going to be there healthy. You'd assume his assists would go up. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he averaged a triple-double this season. And right now I have him as the 4 seed, so that's good enough to win the MVP. I would say if you're in the top 4 of either conference, I think you can win MVP unless you have a triple-double like Westbrook did a couple of years ago because it was the first one, even though they were a 6 seed. So because of that, even if he doesn't have a triple-double, I think he'll still have amazing numbers to the point where they're not going to want to go Giannis again. If LeBron's not as good as he was this past year, which I think he probably won't be because he won't be playing as much and he'll probably regress just a little bit, I think Luka's probably the favorite to win MVP. I couldn't really see anyone else winning over him.
I would agree. Luka's the favorite. I wrote down Luka in my Word document or whatever, in my notes or whatever. But for the sake, not even for the sake, I'm changing it on the spot kind of. And this is, it's so annoying because I'm not a Celtics homer at all. Like I'm really not. And this podcast is making it seem like I am. And I've definitely not been for the past like however many years. But I'm going to go Tatum here. And I know it's going to sound very homer, but, and I'm sure it is to a certain extent, but I think Doncic is the favorite. I ultimately don't know if the 4 seed is a high enough seed to get him the MVP. I think it would be. I think it's going to be between him and Giannis most likely. But I am going to pick Tatum. I think with Kemba being out, I think Tatum's going to get much more shots. Those shots have to go somewhere. They're not going to go to Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart takes more than enough shots already as it is. Like he takes way too many shots. But I mean, I guess it's a trade you have to make. I'm going to go Tatum. He's going to take much more shots. I think he's going to take a step. We saw him. He had, I mean, ever since after the All-Star break, he kind of went to a new level. If he can take just like another half a step, I think he's perfectly capable of winning an MVP. I've had them as the 3 seed. If they end up being the 2 seed, that's even better for them. That gives them a better chance at winning the MVP because ultimately the MVP winner is going to have to be probably somewhere in the top 4 seeds. If the Mavericks fall below the top 4, I would find it hard for Doncic to get that MVP award. So,
yeah, I think they will be top 4. Like obviously, I picked that, but I think they just will because I think it'll be that good. If he's gonna be that good, you're gonna win games because of him. So I think they'll be top 4, and I think the 4 seeds are the cutoff.
I think they will too, but I'm just saying that there's some risk with that. There's a chance they're not. I mean, there's definitely a chance.
Well, it's not guaranteed the Celtics will be top 4 either.
So. I know, I agree, but I'm gonna go Tatum. I'll leave it at that.
All right, again, I mean, I think that's a reach. Obviously, I'm not a Tatum guy, but I think even if you were a Tatum guy, I think they'd even think that would be a reach.
It is a reach. I would say I'm a Tatum guy, and it's definitely a reach, but it's a reach that I'm willing to take because I don't think there's that many great MVP candidates this year. Like Giannis, we've done over and over again. It's boring. Luka's interesting. He's definitely the favorite, but I'm going to go against the grain here. So.
All right. Well, I guess to recap. So MVP, I have Luka. Rookie of the Year, LaMelo Ball. Defensive Player of the Year, Anthony Davis. Most Improved Player, R.J. Barrett. And Coach of the Year, Mike Malone.
Yeah, I've got Coach of the Year, Mike Malone. MVP, Luka. Rookie of the Year, I went LaMelo. Defensive Player of the Year, I went Giannis. And Most Improved, I went Michael Porter Jr.
All right. And then lastly, we're going to – so the NBA starts tomorrow. Like we said earlier, it's Warriors at Nets, Clippers at Lakers. So we're just going to pick who we think is going to win the game. We're not going off any like spreads or anything like that. We're just going to see who wins the game. So I guess I'll go first for the first game. So Warriors, Nets. I'm going to go Nets. Not much I could really say about it. I just think the Nets are going to win the game. I think they're at home. Obviously, there's no fans. I don't think there's going to be any fans there, but I think just to prove to everyone, it's going to be a nationally televised game. Everyone's going to be watching it, so I think they'll just win the game.
Yeah, I'm going to go Nets too. They're home. It's going to mean much more to them than it does to the Warriors. Like, I don't think they really, obviously it's a regular season game, so it matters, but I don't think they care that much. Draymond is doubtful with like a toe injury, I think, for this game. So he's probably not going to play. Not that it even really matters too much, but yeah, I'll go Nets there.
Yeah, and for the second game, Clippers, Lakers. I guess I'm gonna go Clippers. This is what happened last year. First game of the season, Clippers won. That was without Paul George was playing that game. This game it will be AD and LeBron against Kawhi and Paul George. Um, I I'm not even really sure why I'm picking the Clippers. I just think it's gonna create like a reaction by the media for the next for Wednesday that everyone's gonna be like, oh, are the Clippers better than the Lakers? Even though it's one regular season game, but I don't know. I think the Clippers will just win.
I'm gonna go Lakers. Honestly, I could see Clippers winning it as well. I mean, the NBA season is much more difficult to even predict because like anything can happen. It's much different than the NFL, and anything can happen in the NFL too. It's just much different. Like bad teams are gonna beat good teams. That's just how it goes. Like I could have the Lakers higher than the Clippers. The Clippers could still win this game. It's just how it is. I'll go Lakers, but I mean, yeah, there's really not too much to it. I think it'll be a close game. So
All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up for the NBA for this episode for the NBA one.
yeah, that's it. It was a long episode. I mean, that's what we were like 2 hours almost, maybe.
Yeah, no, that was long, but um, I think it was informative. So, and we'll see how our predictions are. We'll probably check through it halfway through the season to see where everything is, and then obviously at the end of the season, we'll see if our awards are right and our standings are somewhat close. Which
Yeah.
I mean, they probably won't be, but I guess we'll see.
I'm sure the teams themselves will be somewhat close, but yeah, I mean, the actual seed placing, I'm sure will be nowhere close to accurate. It'll be sleeping on those Blazers, though. Honestly, I
I
think you
mean, again,
are.
I still
I
have
might,
them.
I might even be sleeping on the Blazers. I don't know.
Well, I don't know about that. I think 5 is way too high, but again, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. That's it. NFL, probably predominantly NFL episode coming out in a couple days. Probably get some NBA in there too, because there'll be a few games that have gone down, but probably whatever, like Thursday, Friday, something around there. So yeah, I mean, that's it. First video episode over, done with. So we'll work on it. We'll see how it is. But yeah, that's it. So see ya.